Okay, let's,
No, actually,
let's call the meeting to order.
Okay.
Okay, we're rolling, I've been told, so let's call the meeting to order at 7:02 PM.
Okay.
Can we have a roll call, please, Garrett?
Yes, Braden.
Here.
I'll second.
Here.
Kennedy here. Egan? On the
On the
phone?
phone.
Okay, Bergam?
Here.
Gabilovich? Here. Time?
Here.
Lamb?
Here.
Rapisan?
Here.
Joe,
Yes,
can you tell us why you cannot attend in person?
I am out of town on mission.
Are you in a hot tub? No, sorry.
Do we have a motion to allow Mr. Egan to attend by phone?
I'll second.
Could you call the roll on that vote, please?
Yes, Paul Segman?
Yes.
Kennedy, yes. Egan can't vote yet. Bergam?
Yes.
Gabilovich?
Yes.
Time?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Rapisan?
Here. Yes.
And Braden?
Yes.
Passes 8-0.
Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion on that?
Move that we approve the consent agenda as listed, items of extras.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Discussion from our big audience back there? No? Can you call the roll, or call the vote on that?
Yeah. Kennedy, yes. Egan? Joe?
Joe, consent agenda?
Yes,
Bergam?
Yes.
Gabilovich?
Yes.
Time?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Rapisan?
Yes.
Braden?
Yes.
Paul Segman?
Yes.
9-0.
Any comments from the general public on non-agenda items? None being said, moving on to the secretary's report.
Okay, we've got some communications this month. Susan Monroe said she really appreciates the circulation department for their friendliness throughout the renovation. And she appreciates, we appreciated her, and that was from Laura saying back to her that basically we appreciated the patrons' flexibility during the renovation as well. Somebody, Susan Schaefer, responded to the email blast that went out that we're so close on the renovation, saying that that the library staff have done a wonderful job of managing a huge project. The library's a Parker's jewel, and congrats to all the library staff. We apparently were the #1 story in the U.S. speed skating newsletter that's emailed to all members of the organization nationwide for the display that was put on the second floor. I'll pass this around so people can see this.
It was a great display. Really was.
It was a good display.
Really was interesting.
And
Number of park
I was
members.
surprised to read it, because I am in the speed skating club.
Oh, yeah.
So I was surprised to read that we were going to install.
I didn't want to say we're surprised you're in the speed skating.
We always think
Well, what
we
I
know
did-
you, and then there's one new fact.
What I do is not speedy and it's barely skating. So it really needs another name, but I do hang with the club and skate with it.
The city colleges of Chicago, from Malcolm X College, their librarian wrote to thank us for the bookends that we must have donated when we were
Yes.
removing things and recycling things.
Yes.
Okay. And then there's another news article for our planned celebration. I'm imagining this is from the, it's from the Health Advocate.
Yes.
That's it. In terms of our conversation this afternoon, do you want me to pick that up in kind of at the unfinished business?
I want to make one comment
Yeah,
about
that'd be good.
correspondence.
Yeah.
There was also an article in, I think it was the Herald, when the libraries was open during the very cold days, when a lot of libraries around it. And I wanted to express my sense of pride and gratitude to the staff for making the personal sacrifice to be out. And there for our patrons who might not have had a convenient place to be. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Well done for staff. Out of curiosity, which of these cameras is working?
If I could add one thing to that?
Sure. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I had a friend who didn't go to work that day because of the cold weather, and his internet went down, and he managed to get to the library and was able to use the internet there, and was appreciative of the fact that the library was open, and he was able to get on the internet and do business when he wouldn't have otherwise. He wasn't making any money there, though.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Oh.
Anything else on the secretary's report?
No, that's it.
Joe, we're on item 6E,
For the cameras.
on page 43 of the packet. Do you have any comments on the year-to-date budget report?
Yeah, I have one comment. If we go to PDF 45, which I think is around page 43,
Okay.
and it relates to the comment later on, but we're at 75% of the year, and our operating budget, we spent 63. With the biggest underspend on the first line, salaries. We're about $300,000 below our budget of $2.436 million. So we're underspending. I'm not exactly sure why that is. I'm not complaining, but when we get later on to our budget for next year, we budgeted $2.40 million. And I'm not sure why we would, if we're underspending by it, at this point, 300,000, why we wouldn't drop our budget for salaries for next year. Maybe Heidi can comment on that.
Do you want to talk about that now or when we get to the budget discussion?
Well, I guess that's a teaser for when we get to the budget discussion. You're probably right. We probably should wait till we get to the budget discussion. But the rest of it, looks in line with where we are year to date, and everything for the most part is on budget, a little under or a little over. Overall, we're under. Our heat is over, and that's explainable, and that will probably continue to increase over our budget because of the cold winter. But it's small dollars in the overall scheme of things. Those are my only comments.
Any questions for Joe? Can we have a motion to approve that?
Oh, I had a question just generally on the technology fund. I wanted to ask, maybe Heidi, you can just, what are we paying Chase for on the technology fund?
What page is that on?
Page 39. We have 3 expenditures on the technology fund this month. One for Biblioteca, which is the return machines, the scanners or whatever they are, I assume. Then we have CVI, which honestly I'm not sure what that is because I thought we were paying them out of the data processing budget line. And then we have Chase, which is I found very strange.
Chase just means we paid it on the library credit card.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what the 1,300 is,
Yeah, okay.
but that's the vendor we paid it to.
Okay.
I mean, I could put the actual vendor, if that would be more helpful.
And what's for
Probably
CVI?
would be.
What are we paying under the technology replacement fund? Or in the technology fund? Because I know we're paying them for, there's the data processing line.
That's the maintenance contract.
Yes.
This is the
What's the other one?
hardware.
This is new hardware.
The new computer.
Oh,
The
so we
computers.
paid for part of that already.
Yes,
Okay.
at our last meeting, the board authorized us to
Right.
go ahead, and they requested a 50%
Down payment.
Okay,
We thought that was reasonable.
thank you.
Did they give you a due date on this? Because there was a concern that it might be months away.
Yeah.
We don't have a due date yet on those.
Out of curiosity, Angela, is the 1/31/2019 CHAE just a misspelling?
It is.
Just missing an S.
It's already penciled in here. Yes, it is.
Okay, so did we get a motion to approve this?
Nobody
No.
proposed it. I'll propose. Motion to approve the treasurer report.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Can you call the vote, please?
Yes, Egan,
Yes.
Berkham,
Yes.
Jabilovich,
Yes.
Kime,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Rappaport,
Yes.
Reardon,
Yes.
Paul
Yes.
Kennedy, yes, passes 9-0.
Library director's report.
Thank you so much. Carl Giametti from Studio GC is joining us here this evening, and specifically for the renovation update part of my report. So I'll just really quickly give you a brief summary, and then we can ask Carl to add anything that I omitted, and be happy to take any questions you might have. If you turn to page 57 of the packet, I have a short summary that on February 8th, we opened the Prospect entrance and the surrounding areas, as well as the children's services. That was fantastic, and we have had nothing but, well, that's not true, not nothing but, we've had lots and lots of positive comments. And about how spacious things are, how bright things are, how nice it is to have a nice new, library to be proud of, and we really appreciated hearing that. The first floor bathroom, the two first floor bathrooms have all of their tile fixtures and partitions in place. We're looking at opening those to the public by the end of this week. Is that correct, Carl?
Yes.
For the fireplace and second floor offices, we are looking at March 1st for the fireplaces and February, fireplace, excuse me. Well, actually, there are two, it's double-sided.
One on each side.
And February 27th for the offices there on the second floor. So some additional time was required to complete those. Additional bathroom tile work on the second floor, redoing the tile that was completed, is slated to begin next Wednesday, the 27th. It was estimated to take approximately 2 weeks, so I would imagine we could reopen those to the public March 15th. Carl, is there anything you would add?
Last week we had talked about some low voltage work that needs to be completed. That was completed. There are some minor things like labeling, wiring, and stuff that needs to be completed, but I know Heidi mentioned that specifically last week, and that has been completed. Let's see. We are anticipating, so on Thursday, myself and the rest of the engineering team will be out here to do a complete punch list of the entire project. We anticipate issuing a certificate of substantial completion the following week once the fireplace is completed. It was Heidi's request that the certificate not be issued until that work was completed. So at that time, we will go ahead and issue that certificate with the punch list attached and begin moving towards final completion. The last thing that I think just needs to be mentioned, Heidi, were you going to talk about the meeting for this Friday?
Oh, go right ahead, Carl.
Okay, so at the last meeting, there was a discussion of kind of having a cost resolution meeting where there would be 2 board members present, taking into account everyone's availability and the speed that CSI could get Heidi's list of credits price and over to the library. We would like to schedule that Friday afternoon. Try to get everyone's schedule to work appropriately. We're kind of looking at a 3:30, 4 o'clock start time. I know it's later in the day on Friday, which no one likes, but I think everyone has an interest in trying to get this resolved as soon as possible. So I will be there, Rick McCarthy will be there, representatives from CSI will be there, and then I bet Heidi, you will coordinate the 2 board members that will attend that meeting.
Yes, and I heard back that time doesn't work for our two frontline.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm gonna be at a client meeting in Ohio on Friday, so I will not be able to attend.
can attend earlier in the afternoon, I can't attend later though.
So we thought maybe 2 o'clock if it's possible, to
Okay,
cheat it earlier.
Yeah, I'll talk to everyone involved and get back. Why don't we go ahead and set up an alternate early the following week if we can. I don't know if that'll work for CSI, because I believe Pete said he had some
In
availability.
the next 2 weeks.
Okay,
Not be available.
Try and make it on this Friday if you can,
okay,
you know, move it along. And then that will also give us time for further discussion if needed.
okay. And also there was talk about doing a walkthrough with kind of the various credits and ads. So I can be here before that meeting, so if the two board members would like to meet me and presumably Heidi earlier, we can walk through, so that way all that information is kind of observed before the meeting. So once we kind of organize that time, we can set up a time to meet a little bit earlier and do the walkthrough.
See, I could be here like, well, no, I can't.
You're gonna be in Ohio then.
Yeah, driving to Ohio in the morning. I could be here at like 9. My meeting in Ohio is at, I think it's 3 o'clock. So my game plan is to get on the road early.
I can also check my schedule and I could try to be here on Friday as well. I can see what I can do.
I can make
But
myself
Steve, you can be
available,
here?
I can do it in the morning, yeah.
and I can be available whenever you.
I just am not available after like 3 o'clock.
Yeah, I may be.
Unfortunately, I'm not available in the morning. That's
2
right, I
o'clock
have an
kind of
immovable meeting.
2 o'clock works for
Feels like our
Steve?
best bet if
Right, yeah,
that
2
can
o'clock,
work.
yeah.
Yeah.
That works for me, I will
Latest
check
I
for
can go.
CSI and Rick and,
Joe,
That's
are
the
you in
latest
town
I
on
know.
Friday?
This Friday, no.
Okay.
so I'll reach out to CSI and Rick McCarthy. Heidi, I'll let you coordinate what board members will be there, but we're gonna, we reviewed the list of credits, and CSI thinks that they will have all that information to us by Thursday, or Friday at the latest.
Carl, I have a question. Once you get the punch list prepared, how long will CSI have to prepare to fix everything on the punch list?
It's a little bit difficult to say without having completed the punch list inspection.
It depends on
It
what needs to be
depends. I mean,
done.
there are some outstanding items, for example, the door into the main stairway that has a 2-month lead time. So certainly it won't be final completion until that door is in.
Okay.
But, they want to get their money as quickly as you want to be completed with the project. So, I mean, we'll continue to have weekly meetings and push them to complete all these items.
And our retainer is what, 10%?
10% retainage at the end, correct?
Yeah.
So we can expect a pay application from CSI probably next week.
Right, they would like to submit it regardless of the outcome of Friday for the work performed to date and work approved. So I think, once a month, it's expected that they will submit a pay app.
Right. So I just want to recognize that, and obviously the 10% retainage would still be there. The negotiation and discussion about these change orders would still be there. So when I get that pay request, their monthly pay request, I would approve that to pay them for the work done on this schedule unless there's any,
How much is the actual retainage?
Dollar amount wise?
Yeah, 200,000.
No, it'll be here, if I recall what the contract sum is at this point.
10%.
Sorry, give me 1 second. Be like 140,000.
And you're looking for credit of approximately 70?
the credit?
Yeah.
I don't think.
We're waiting to see what those credits are. Some of that stuff is.
Yeah, there are already some on the list.
Yeah, so it seems to me like the stuff that's left,
Pretty small.
yeah, it's generally, it might be what, $7,000, $8,000 max? I
I
don't
don't have a good estimate.
know. Yeah.
I think the range is probably closer than.
Yeah, no, it
Yeah.
doesn't look like it's big
Right.
stuff.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
mean,
on the-
one of the credits there I know is just a few $100s.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, that's,
And I feel like the balance that we need to strike is, to make sure that they are compelled, feel compelled to do the work, but also that we acknowledge the work that's been done, so that they can pay their subs, so the subs will come back and do the additional work that still needs to be done on the project. So when we were talking earlier today, I felt like that was a concern that we should address, that I don't want the board to be surprised if I approve this while we're holding other things. Carl, did you have a recommendation for us?
I mean, I believe, with not having the project manual and the contract in front of me, but I believe the contractor is authorized once a month to submit work, the pay application for work completed. It will certainly not bill on any work that has not, any items that are still up for discussion and, or has not been explicitly approved by the board. So, I mean, I think the board should expect that, and because there is not another board meeting before the end of the month, I don't see any way that this next pay application, even if everything is resolved on Friday, this next pay application will still not have all those items until the board actually votes and approves.
Do you have a report as to how much they have paid their subs?
We do. We get trailing payroll and lien waivers with every application, so yes, we every pay application we know that.
Okay, and if you could just provide Heidi with, call it, an overview of that. I would think that the subs have been paid all along.
Yeah.
And they're not owed any more than, call it, the withholding percentage.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. If you look on the G702, the continuation sheet on the back of the pay app,
Yes.
that has every single sub listed, what they've been paid, and then the waivers where they certify that they've been paid that amount and releasing their lien rights on that portion of work.
Yes, so we have all of that documentation.
Yeah, and does that spreadsheet say what their total contract is also?
Yep.
So you can extrapolate from that.
Just wanna make sure
So
there weren't
just
any
let's be clear.
I
surprises.
don't see any problem with
She
that.
should pay the bill.
140 grand is enough to get them to come back and finish, I would think.
Great.
I hope so.
Okay. And then Carl and I did receive information from CSI as to why the delay on the fireplace and the offices on the second floor. With the offices, we encountered some unforeseen conditions. There's some conduit. You want to describe it, Carl?
Are you talking about the buried conduits in the dumbwaiter shaft?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a bundle of 6, 8 conduits that were buried inside the dumbwaiter shaft that when we tore open the shaft, like, well, there they are right there, and so we had to devise a solution that required some time to go back and forth.
They were a conduit for what? Electric?
So there's an electrical panel on that floor, and there were some, what I would call unorthodox wiring practices used in the original construction, where there was a lighting time clock right next to it that, for example, okay, well, it's right next to a panel, it was reasonable to assume that it was actually being controlled by that panel. Well, no, they disconnected it, and then there was a lighting issue at the library, and we found out the time clock was actually wired to the panel below. So there was kind of some juggling and trying to reverse engineer what was actually completed. So we could position electrical work in the wall, but yeah, the framing solution has been discussed and agreed upon, so now they're framing and moving out and moving forward with that work, and I think they said middle of next week as well.
Yes.
For completing that space.
Yes, and the change order that we had on the electrical and the framing in that space was about $2,700. So we took some time to negotiate it down, it's $1,500 now. And so I think that unforeseen condition and then taking the time to negotiate the CO was what caused the roughly 1 week delay for that space. And then for the fireplace, it was, they're waiting for the delivery of the actual 2 fireplaces that will go back to back. So that was slated for last week. But now it will be next week. So I wanted to make sure you knew where the delays came from. And,
in the children's department, some of the ornamental lights are in above the desk and above the story time area, and the remaining ones in the lobby will be installed, I believe, by the end of this week.
I ran into former President Bob Trisna, who was very impressed with the completion, children's, and the work that was done. Just wanted to give Bob some credit.
He was one of the first folks on Friday.
Yeah, I
Does he-
ran into him here. He says, "I'm happy and I'm never happy."
That's true.
Sounds like
So
Bob.
are we done with the inside?
The inside?
The construction inside, because I want to ask about the columns.
Oh,
Sure,
sure.
yeah.
Are we done with the columns?
We are not, and so, the work outstanding on the columns, because winter, there was a delay, from the column manufacturer, and I believe the exact reason was given, was that hunting season began in Montana, and that's where these columns are manufactured. So there was some delay in getting the columns, but they are installed now. The sealant was done just to make it watertight. However, given the temperatures that dropped, we did not want them doing painting outside the manufacturer's recommendation. So that work will be held open until April. We did, what's it?
Duck hunting season.
Right, yeah, exactly.
It's turkey.
Hopefully we don't run into, any more, outdoor sporting, seasons there. But, we did discuss the possibility, and Heidi, I think agreed with, my suggestion, that because really 98% of the work is done, as is common practice, to reduce the retainage down to 5%, that, really allows the GC to close out a lot of their subcontracts. Because, for example, the carpenter has no more work left. The punch list was done and completed. Heidi received a copy of our punch list. The main issue that we're addressing now is just the way the sealant joints interact with the column edges. Some are more visible than we were anticipating. And so that's something that when the weather gets warmer and they can get the painter out here and do some finish work, that'll be addressed. But yeah, right now that work is kind of just in a holding pattern until the weather cooperates.
And when you say the sealant joints, you're talking about both the vertical and the
Vertical and horizontal, yeah.
Okay.
Especially the horizontal. I think the horizontals are the worst offenders. There are portions of vertical joints that I think are really acceptable, considering it hasn't been painted yet. So you really do have a color difference between the column and the sealant, and all that will be painted. I think a lot of the vertical joints will get close to disappearing, or at least will be something that unless you look for it, you won't see it. But the horizontal joints definitely need some work.
Okay, but one of the reasons I'm asking a lot about this is Angela just had me sign the last bill, or not the last bill, the second to last bill.
Right.
And she said 5% retainage. Is there enough there to get the rest of the work done if this contractor decides never to come back?
In my opinion, there is. We're really looking at a few days of, a painter out there. It's certainly for a project of that size and for a contractor of the size of KM Holly, they need that money. It's a small project. There's not huge margins. That really represents the only money he's going to make probably on that project. So he certainly calls me once a week just to check in, just so we're always talking. But yeah, I don't anticipate.
Is he gonna be able to paint that without one of those lifts?
He'll probably bring the lift out here.
So, so that seems like that would be pretty, if say they did walk away, that would be a substantial cost to have a lift brought out and hire a painter, so it's a little bit more than just hiring a painter, right?
Well, he probably pays a few $100 a day to rent a lift.
Yeah, the lifts aren't that expensive.
Yeah, I mean, they're,
No.
And one
No.
more.
We talked about the other day that it was gonna cost a lot of money just to look into before we went into the
I
columns.
mean, I don't know what 5% is. What's 5%?
About 8,000, I think, right?
How
Wasn't
much?
it 8,000? Wasn't it,
Yeah,
it
wasn't
was
the
160?
150,
Yeah, 150, 160, it's about 8,000.
Yeah.
So when this was suggested and Carl said he felt that it was a typical practice, I did speak with a colleague of mine who said that yes, for smaller projects like this, especially ones that are so visible, like for a smaller contractor, this is gonna be the kind of project where drive by the Park Ridge Library, I did those columns. That, for $8,000 for a small shop like that, it's a big, that's not a small sum. That, so we went ahead and did that. And what Carl mentioned about the joints, that is of great concern to me, that they make those joints, what phrase did we use, Carl? Nearly invisible?
Visually indistinguishable.
Visually indistinguishable. So there,
Substantially.
there does need to be some work done there as well as the paint. It was suggested that maybe we consider a different finish of paint to help it be more forgiving, but they're gonna do a sample for us, a small sample. We would rather them address the nearly indistinguishable mark, hit that mark before we try to fix it with paint.
Right, knowing that this is the front main entrance and is seen by every person that visited, we wrote into these project specifications that they need to a mock-up of one of the columns. So that way, it's not like they paint all 8, and then we need to fight over, oh, no, it's not what we were expecting. They are gonna be doing, either one column or one portion of the column for Heidi, John, and myself to review and say, okay, this is acceptable, this isn't acceptable, we need to revise our practices. So they will be doing that, but again, we're weather limited. But until then, I think that, they match the profile really, really well. I think they turn out nice, we just gotta finish the joints, and I think that should be all set.
Thank you.
And I want to be respectful of Carl's time, if there aren't any other
I
questions.
have one
for him.
more. The conduit and the dumbwaiter reminded me that we're very anxious to make sure we have as-built drawings. Is that your responsibility or CSI's?
That is CSI's.
Okay, so-
However, something like that, because it's an existing condition, would likely not appear on an as-built drawing. They're responsible for marking up the.
Right, I get
Okay.
that, but I just don't wanna lose, in the great rapture of completion, I don't wanna lose that deliverable.
No, absolutely.
Let's make sure that is on Pete's list, to make sure we get those before we write the last check.
Certainly.
Yeah, good detail.
Anything else for Carl? Thank you, Carl. You're welcome to stay and listen to us for the next couple hours, or you can go.
Sorry, I think I need to go relieve my friend who wasn't able to get a babysitter tonight, so he's anxiously waiting for my return. My wife is also at a work function, so
Oh,
That's a good
Thank you,
friend.
Carl.
thank you,
Thank
Carl.
you.
I almost expect her here, so. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Continuing with the report, the new return stations are up and running. We've had, little things that we've learned along the way and realignments that have been made with the settings. Feel like it's really serving us well so far. We did have the wrong shipment from Biblioteca for the self-checks twice in January. Anastasia Brahmache, our circulation manager, did a great job letting them know how disappointed we were and teeing that up for me to hit it home. They have now provided an estimated delivery date between April 2nd and April 16th for the 5th and final unit. Anastasia and her team have come up with a plan so that we don't lose time, that we would install one of the 4 tower kiosk checkout stations in the lobby and make sure that we are able to beta test the new checkout equipment with the public from our desk, from our service desk. So she's got a rollout plan that she's gonna go ahead and she's already putting into action. Staff are training right now on one of the checkout stations in their workroom, and she anticipates bringing that out to the lobby March 1st. But thank you for making good with a bad situation. Any questions for me about 3M or Biblioteca or that equipment?
Just out of curiosity, because I actually haven't used one of the checkout stations. Now you're talking about, are they like the check-in station, which I'm so impressed with, where you basically bring your book, you scan it through something, it rolls through, or is it just a wave, or is it just carrying it out and it automatically?
Well, it's a very large kiosk with a very inviting screen. It has some cool LED lights. It has a glass shelf where you can lay a pile of your checkouts and it will scan them all and check them out to you.
Okay.
Wow. So it's different than the one that was down there before, where you kind of had to play with the barcode and you had,
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So all our materials have been tagged with RFID technology, so that's what makes it work.
Is that sucker set up and working now?
And
The
the
new one?
circulation workroom, yep,
Could we see it after this meeting?
sure.
I'd like to do that if that's okay.
How many books can it handle at once?
So far we've tested 8.
8?
No, it's impressive.
Cool.
Thank you.
Are you happy with the book sorter?
Mhm.
And it's accurate and efficient and all those things?
It is, we're running into a couple issues, but the good thing is they go into the exception bin, so we're able to troubleshoot and problem solve. But I think as time goes on, we'll get it all sorted out.
Excellent, thank you.
Nice job, Anastasia.
Staff happy with the device?
Yeah, they're all very excited.
Yeah, we all, had a little bit of trepidation, not sure what to expect. And I walked into the workroom the other day and one of the crew was practicing on the checkout station, and was talking with another staff member who was sitting at the desk, working on a project, about how cool it was. So that was very heartening to see. Okay. The other thing that I really want to point out and share with the trustees is that as Josh shared with his very generous shout out on Wednesday, January 30th, 128 people visited the Park Ridge Public Library during the polar vortex. We had reduced hours, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And I've been in the process of collecting data, information, and synthesizing to share that with the trustees. I had set up a staff survey, and as of yesterday and the day before, I was still receiving feedback from the staff. So I'd like to give that some more time before I come back. Also, I talked with a colleague who shared with me her guidelines for how winter weather affects library services. So I feel like there's a lot of information out there for us to gather and digest, and so I would ask for some additional time so that we can really do it right. This report, great.
Was there, I know there was some discussion regarding making the library a warming center, and then looking though realistically at what are the guidelines as to a warming center, and then needless to say, under significant weather, what impact does that have with respect to then, of course, the homeless coming in, which they're the public, there's nothing wrong with that. And I know I thought either you and or Angela were further vetting that with the state or the county or whomever defines warming centers.
We found out a lot of information so far. At the state level, all state buildings, I don't think I can say all state buildings, but the state designates state-owned facilities throughout Illinois as official warming centers. And an official warming center doesn't mean that you provide sheltering or food or any general amenities other than it's a space and the heat's on. The state of Illinois has on their website that the governor requested that the mayor of every town designate a local warming center, which from what I understand, that was the understanding of what we were as a warming center. Also, a warming center is also defined as during their hours of operation. It's not a 24/7 type scenario. So some libraries, as I understand it, have chose to interpret that, well, if we stay open, we're a warming center, but if we close because of a warning or a governor-issued state of emergency, then we're not a warming center. We're only a warming center when we're open. I do understand that warming centers can also be designated at the county level and have similar requirements. To date, I've only delved into Lake County. to get some guidance, but I think basically what it comes down to is, as I mentioned to the reporter who contacted us, we know that the services we offer are of great importance to the people who visit the library, to the community of Park Ridge. We know that, and we know that the people who came in that day came because they needed to use our services, wanted to use our services, and benefited from them. I think the thing for me that was really tough was to say, okay, there was an official state of emergency issued by the governor. He did also mention in his statement it was so that municipalities could get state aid if necessary. So he did qualify the statement with that information, but I felt as though it would be helpful for us to have a sort of if-then type of understanding of what we do in these scenarios, and make sure that we discuss that with our mayor, and make sure that
In the interest of time, why don't we get this into a report and a recommendation, and then we should then consider it,
Thank you.
okay?
Thank
Rather
you.
than-
I would just add one qualifier to that. If there is state aid available, then, it's going to other towns, then to see if there's something that we could also get too, if that is part of the recommendation.
My understanding of that's if there's damage, devastation, that the state
Oh.
aid would come into play, not
Oh, it's
necessarily
not.
for manning emergency services.
Okay, not
Necessarily.
for keeping a warm center open, there's no
Not-
aid for that, or
not as
county
much.
aid or anything like that, no.
And yes, thank you, Josh, I get excited about this topic, thank you very much. And yes, the staff were tremendous that day. So those were the highlights that I wanted to share. If you have any additional questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them now.
Just one quick thought on the innovative drive-up stations,
Oh, the
concierge.
curbside pickup,
Right.
yes.
I'm wondering if it wouldn't be valuable to move that to spots in the back of the library. Just because I think that a lot gets lost on Prospect.
Well,
And-
that's a favorite Starbucks parking spot.
Exactly.
Yes.
So as we consider the parking lot adjacent to the library could perhaps have one or two spots so designated.
That's a great suggestion, thank you.
Anything else on that, Heidi?
Unless you have any questions for me.
Questions? No? Okay, moving on to committee reports, planning and ops.
Okay, let's see here. Planning and ops. We have a motion to approve the purchase of meeting room chairs for some not to exceed $19,999.00. We had some discussion on this, and I can attest to the ratty nature of the existing chairs firsthand.
So,
I have some problems with this. It's okay?
Joe,
Joe.
if you can hold off just a second, Heidi was, I think, getting ready to talk to us about the memo
Okay.
here on page 61.
Sure.
You don't have the luxury of looking at it like we do.
as I draw a breath.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I'm not yet ready to make a recommendation, but I definitely feel like it would be of value to hear from the board if the format for the assessment and the criteria are more in line with the board's expectations for this purchase. And then from there, I hope to have the samples and quotes on purchasing other options at quantity prior to the March committee meeting.
So the difference between what you presented last week and this week is that it's cost, quality, and weight is kind of what you looked at now.
Right, based on our discussion, those were the three, and I weighted them equally. And have an example here of the scoring you can see that there are sections that are not yet filled out because I don't,
Sure,
haven't
no, I
sat
was
in
just
them yet.
making sure those are the three that you were looking at.
Yes.
Okay.
So does the quality rating, that includes not just, you know, comfort or appearance, it also includes durability? So I'm assuming you pay twice the amount of money, they last twice as long.
Warranty, reviews, you know, user, if they're happy with it and have reported. So yeah, we lumped all of those in together. In terms of like a lifespan,
Yeah.
I don't think I can really speak to that, but all of the products we're considering have a 10-year limited warranty.
They all do.
Yes.
That's what I struggle with. You know, I like the fact that they're more easy to stack for the staff and, you know, appearance and comfort, but, you know, if we have to pay twice as much and we're not gonna get any longer period of time out of the chair, I think that's just a lot of variables to roll up into one
It really is.
decision, so I can see why it's been a struggle.
Well, and you can see with the scoring, and I don't wanna forget about Mr. Egan, and his comment, but, as you can see sort of from this rough outline, I think we're probably, running the risk of having a three-way tie.
I noticed that.
So, John has been really helpful in assessing the two chairs that we've received to date, the two of the four. Using cleaning solutions, seeing what a scratch looks like on the underside. You know, he's been very, very helpful, and so I would ask him to help if we end up with a situation like that, we're like, well, you know, here we have these, what's the tiebreaker? What makes the difference between these three? And I would get his feedback to be able to share. I agree with you, it's a really tough decision. I think that the difference between the 7-pound chair and the 12-pound chair would be noticeable to the staff, you know, primarily when they're doing the, you know, stacking up on top of the stack and pushing the dolly. So, you know, that might be a consideration, but yeah, it's a tough one. I hope the other two chairs that we get live up to their reviews, and we have 4 viable options to compare.
Thank you, Joe?
2 real quick things. One, what's the current weight of the chairs we have?
15 pounds.
Yeah, so it sounds like all these are improvement over that. Secondly, I thought we were gonna make a recommendation tonight, but it sounds like we're not going to, which is fine. But for the, some of the younger members on the board, younger being fewer years on the board, we went through this process a few years ago with the previous director, and had all the chairs come in, we all sat in them, we evaluated them, we came up with a recommendation. I think it's the K1 chair, which the previous library director was her strong first preference. The board decided not to go with that one for a number of reasons, including cost. I'm fine with going through the process again. I just want to give everyone the history on this. They were not purchased because the previous library director opted not to purchase them, even though the board wanted to purchase one of these on the list. I can't remember which one it was, or if it was a different one, but we had been through a very similar process before, and that K1 chair was not the winner, but it could be the winner this time. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Joe.
That's true.
Anything else on chairs?
So we'll table
we're-
that, or
Yeah, can somebody make a motion to table that?
I'll move to table that motion.
I'll second it.
Can I just ask, did we answer your question, Henry? About what you deem important? Are you satisfied?
I think so. I feel like if you were dissatisfied, you would say, you know, let's have a different criteria for next month. So I feel okay with it. I think that I think Shar raises a very good point about the chairs, and I'm very opinionated about the weight of the chair and what a difference that makes in when someone needs to do a 30-minute transformation of that room, pulling out 70 chairs, and oftentimes it's one person doing it, pushing the dolly and doing that. And so I want to make sure that without beating you over the head with it, I successfully convey what that looks like to the staff and why I feel that's worth the investment over the 10-year lifespan. And I fear that I'm not being very successful or helpful with that aspect. So I'm glad to have a little bit more time, maybe to think about it. If you have feedback for me, you know, before the next cow, or I'd be happy to hear your thoughts.
Bring a stack of chairs and make us all lift them.
That's not a bad
I'm
idea.
just
That's
kidding.
actually a good idea.
The chair that you want, you hold up. The last man or woman standing.
It's their pick. That's a good one.
So I'm happy to give that more thought and more preparation for the next cow. So I think it's good that we'll have a little bit more time to better prepare this.
Okay, thank you. So, any more discussion? We have a motion to table it in a second. Any more discussion? No discussion over there?
I have one quick. Is it- if we've limited the amount of money we're gonna spend as a total, and trust the library director to make a decision on our behalf. I mean, we're not gonna get these for $10,000, maybe. And it's not gonna be more than $20,000. So my inclination is to say, the library director has been given our guidance, our wisdom. She does not need our butts to make this decision. I think, in my opinion, we shouldn't table this. We should authorize her to go buy some chairs.
I agree
That's my
with that.
opinion.
I agree with that. I've always thought that, you know, gosh, what I like in a chair, it shouldn't dictate the entire building, especially if John's the one that has to haul them around, stack them, and take them out. And I mean, I remember the sticker shock when Joe described our prior process where we looked at these, and I thought, oh, 8,000 versus 18,000. This K1 isn't worth that. No way. I was absolutely against it. But when you put it that way, flipping a room in a half hour from going from one program to Battle of the Books and then another meeting, and if there's a 10-year warranty on these chairs and we pay 18,000 versus 8,000, that's only 1,000 a year. And that could preclude like a back injury or some other job. I mean, 1,000 a year for all that convenience and the ability to fulfill our program obligations. I mean, that's, when I look at it that way, 10 years, then I'm really more convinced.
And I think you had also mentioned, I'm sorry, that the warranty on some of these 10-year chairs was a 10-year on the frame only. Well, the frame.
Not these.
Okay.
If it was limited like that, we
Yeah.
eliminated it.
Okay, all right, good. I'm sorry.
No,
Sorry
no,
to-
no.
No, but I'm supportive
I
of your,
agree.
of your motion instead of tabling it, maybe just deferring.
You know what, I understand the sentiment, if I can bring maybe a little bit more pragmatism to the issue. Our purchasing policy requires that not only do we have 3 bids, but that we actually vote on what we're gonna spend and who we're gonna spend it with.
Okay.
So I think we'd be violating our purchasing policy if we did that.
Well, making the decision, not confirming what she decides. We have to vote on it,
Oh,
obviously.
okay, I thought you meant vote.
Okay,
to
well-
No,
make
I'm
written
talking about the
policy.
actual decisioning.
The
Right,
actual
on this chair.
bidding process
Yeah.
is under $20,000, right?
Quotes.
We
under
need 3
20.
quotes
Right.
under 20 grand, but not
Mhm.
actual bidding.
I see.
Bidding's above 20 grand, where you write the specs and put it out.
Okay.
But I still think we need to vote on an actual amount of money to an actual vendor, true?
Oh,
I
yeah,
agree.
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
But I too appreciate the thought. So I will get, the awesome team, Jody has been on how many chair websites it was. She's been amazing.
Thank you, Jody.
She's our
We will
chairwoman.
have, yeah, we will have that in really good shape for you for the March CAL. We'll have the four quotes, and the assessment of the chairs. We have John's recommendation, and, you know, if any kind of participatory, demonstrative thing would be helpful, you know, just let me know. Josh, I printed a picture for him.
Thank you. I was here this day, and I have a high school friend who was he started a second family with his second wife. He now has a 2-year-old. So I was here with him and his daughter for story time. And then I came, and that was at 9:30. And there was a second story time that went till 11:15 or so. And then I was here for the library luncheon. And in 26 minutes, they went from, how many people do we have?
It's 75 plus for the luncheon.
Right, yeah. So they went from a setup with carpet on the floor, you know, and the mothers taking their kids out, to tables with a piano, a podium. I mean, all these things had to be, you know, it's a complete restructuring of a multifunction room. And those suckers are in bad shape, and they're very heavy.
And they were amazing, 14 of those 8-foot tables, and they did it all in less than 30 minutes.
There's plenty of things there on the,
How many people did that? Is it just?
2.
It was just 2?
I still think we are still coming back to that same conclusion that we're gonna table this motion.
Apparently.
Right,
Yes,
any more
exactly.
discussion on this motion? On tabling the motion? Okay, can we have a vote?
do we have to roll call the motion for today?
I
Or would
withdraw
it just be
the
a voice
motion.
vote?
I withdraw the motion.
Okay.
All right, we'll do it next month.
How about all in favor?
It's tabling, right?
There's no action to take.
Do we need a voice vote, or can we?
You could probably go either way. If you've already got it on the paper, you could just do a voice vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So that motion is tabled. Moving on to communications and development.
I don't think we have any additional reports at this point. As we discussed last week, we're starting to kind of look at this community engagement plan, and I know that Heidi and her team, they're almost ready to bring on a new marketing person, full-time, so that'll be great. And so once we kind of have all hands on deck, then we'll start to really, their team will really start to put together the plan of action on how we're gonna get this started and run it by the board, and we'll go from there. So more to come.
And I think there's a little bit more coming up in the personnel meeting too, about how this relates to Heidi's goals and stuff.
Yes. Right.
Okay, building and grounds.
Building and grounds. Okay, you know, if you go to page 65, there is the previous minutes, and do I have a motion to approve Buildings and Grounds Committee of the Whole minutes of February 12th?
Oh,
You don't need that.
2019, I don't need
do that
that.
as an outcome.
Okay. We don't need that.
Just move to that vote.
Okay. Okay, there's a motion to accept a quote for the low voltage cabling in the amount of $19,491.41 from Airport Electric Company. And it does include the material as reported by Heidi. It also, they acknowledge that they are paying prevailing wage. And that was confirmed, if I'm correct, Heidi?
Yes, sir.
So is there any discussion as it relates to this particular motion?
Quick question. They're providing only wire, they're not providing anything else? Because it says Airport Electric will provide all wire and labor. So I'm assuming it's only wire that they're providing. There's no,
They're terminating them.
maybe piece of conduit or something like that?
No, there's no conduit for low voltage.
I understand that, but I'm wondering if they're like
Termination and.
plates or, you know, whatever. Anyway, I don't think this is a big deal, but I'm just trying to
And you're right, I would make the assumption that it's a finished look that they're providing.
In the original letter, they said they specified .6 in the connectors.
Okay. Take your word for it, Jim. You know what-
So
you
this
know what
is
this
just
talking
to
about.
get us ready for the Wi-Fi and the camera installation. So these guys, they won't be installing them, they won't be, doing any of that end work. They'll be running the cables so that, we can have those put in.
So how long will we have wires sticking out of holes in the wall?
I don't believe they're gonna be sticking out of holes in the wall. I think, a lot of it happens in the ceiling, and it'll be coiled up in the ceiling,
Okay.
ready for when it's tapped into.
When is the
Are they
Wi-Fi
gonna
and security
have to
cameras
pull it out
being,
then?
when is the next step then of the Wi-Fi installation and the cameras?
So for the Wi-Fi hotspots, Angela, do you feel like you could make comment on the E-rate process that we're currently going through, or shall I do that? Okay. CVI, our tech consulting and service providing firm, has been walking us through the process of applying for E-rate discounts for equipment. So the Wi-Fi hotspots, the administrative staff right now is preparing, do they call it an RFP?
It's
In
a-
E-rate.
It's a Form 470 with an RFP attached to the form.
So basically, it's a government subsidized discount for schools, libraries, etc., that if we follow the Child Internet Protection Act, SIPA, and have filtered internet, among some other qualifications, we can qualify for, we're hoping, a 50% discount on this equipment. So a for-profit can, as long as they're qualified and they meet all the recommendations, can shop these RFPs and bid on them through this E-rate platform. And then we get the best deal, and then the E-rate subsidy, we get a 50% discount. We get basically the hardware for half.
So this is
that federal?
reimbursement? Is that a reimbursement?
One
Sorry.
one at a time?
Sorry.
So it is federal, and we're going the route of not doing the reimbursement, but the vendor gets reimbursed. So, because that has a specific time frame, we wouldn't be able to start the project until July. We wouldn't be able to install, but we thought that'd really be worth it to save that
That's a great idea.
kind of money.
That's great.
We're green with this process, so we're, double checking every I and T and making sure they're all good. But the application is due by the end of February, and things are looking good, and as long as we do everything right, we should get
Is there a
excellent
head
pricing.
count as to cameras and Wi-Fi antennas or whatever? Are we talking 25, are we talking 105?
I did
I don't
not, so we have 36 camera locations that we're looking at,
Okay.
and 25 wireless access locations. I don't have with me, this would be a phased.
So we don't have to buy them all at once.
Right, so I'm sorry, I don't have the exact numbers with me.
No, I'm
but
just trying to get my head around what's the scope of it. And then if, in your application, do you have to tell them what your scope is? I would think you would.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I just don't remember the number. We were, wonderful Ed has been championing that
Okay.
project, so I can get that information to you via email. I'm sorry, I don't have it.
And I'm sure you told us this before, but remind me, are any of these security cameras gonna be outside?
Yes, we're looking at one for each corner of the building,
Good.
that, one of those cool round ones that do the,
Okay.
We knew what you meant.
Panoramic.
yes,
It looks good, that's what you're saying.
the this, yeah.
Jazz
Can you make sure that we just check with the police department before those go in, because we had some discussions with them about every time we would tell them we have a problem, they'd say, well, we told you to hang security cameras. I don't want them to say the next time you didn't put them in the right place.
Oh, okay.
And just a quick question, Heidi, is this does our compliance mean that we have internet filters on the computers in the children's area, or all computers?
I believe we have them on all computers. I believe the requirement could
Is
only
if somebody
be limited
asks.
to children. I can find out more about that.
I just wanna know what the policy is and the law is, cause I think if somebody says turn off the filter, I think we have to. I may be wrong, but.
Right, it's my understanding that if you can't find if a patron from a public computer is blocked from finding the information that they want, that we can assist them in getting that information from our service desks, you know, as well. In the, how it's turned off, I'm still learning a lot about this. But, you know, my understanding is we meet this obligation, and then from there, I'm still on a learning curve.
Okay, thank you.
Going back to our motion.
I think last week I asked for the information about what it cost extra because of this going back out to the prevailing wage. What, did you find that out from the original quote?
I believe we said we would track that in the minutes.
Oh, you added it, okay.
Right, and we had, well, in a previous meeting, I'm gonna double check that they're there, Gareth. And if they're not, I will make sure we get them in the minutes of this meeting, and just to get it out there. The original quote from CVI was approximately $16,000. I will confirm that exact amount for the minutes.
Okay.
And then the first round of quotes that we received from these prevailing wage quotes was $25,000 approximately. Again, I will confirm the numbers for the minutes. And then in letting them know we need to go to bid, and that we'd be happy to let them bid the project. 2 of the vendors lowered their prices.
All right, I thought that this was a solid quote or price.
Yeah, to the.
With
just
prevailing
the-
wage.
Yeah, with prevailing wage, so this is kinda like, yeah, compared to this, to the original, it sounds like it's about a 20% increase.
Yeah, and I will confirm those exact numbers and make sure that that's in the minutes.
Yes. Okay, do we need to amend the language of the motion to acknowledge that it includes material and complies with prevailing wage? I don't necessarily think so.
I don't think so.
They
It's in the
revised
memo.
that, yeah,
Yeah,
and they revised their quote.
great, okay.
Many too, right?
I will move to accept quote of the low voltage cable in the amount of $19,491.41 from Airport Electric Company located at 6342 Central Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. Do I hear a second?
No second required.
No second required. Right from there. Okay.
Discussion? Are we done with discussion?
All right, second.
Yes.
Trevillage?
Yes.
Kime?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Rappasan?
Yes.
Reardon?
Yes.
Paul Segman?
Yes.
Candice, yes. Egan?
Yes,
Passes unanimously.
Heidi, can I just make one more comment on that?
Please.
With regards to, I still suspect that you're gonna have a bunch of holes in places and some wires sticking out of them. When you hire these guys and sign the contract, can you ask them, you know, because if we have to wait until July to have things installed, so that they not have the wires sticking way out to try to
Absolutely.
push them into the wall and, you know, make them look like, you know, we don't have spaghetti hanging out of our wall.
No spaghetti.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Pat?
No, I used to think libraries were all about books, but it's also, I guess,
Joe, moving on to budget and finance. Joe, are you there?
yeah, I was on mute. Can we go to, I believe page 71 of the packet?
Absolutely. Would the board like a summary, or, I guess I was kind of under the assumption we go to Q&A on this. We reviewed this at the January COW and again at the February COW. I don't have any changes to report than from that original discussion.
Right, so maybe one question I have, I had the trailer on earlier, on the salary line. Why do we have it at 2.4 million when we're underspending our 2.4 million budget for this year?
Sure. Angela, do you happen to bring any of the staffing detail other than the departments? Okay. So when Angela and I first started talking about the staffing, what we started with was making some realignments that had already happened in real life in the budget. So this person had been transferred to this department, but those funds were still allocated to that department. And so, we did a lot of remapping, and we also did some forecasting about what we think, we would need. And at that point, we had made the decision to combine the reference and reader services teams into one department. We had two great managers, and so one manager became the adult services manager, and then the other manager filled a position that had been open for over a year. And that position had been budgeted for this fiscal year. So that's one of the reasons, and I know this doesn't address your question yet, Joe, but give me time. So that right there was it $100,000 or so, 90,000? That, was never gonna be spent this year. And we didn't fill that position with an outside staff person, we moved someone over. Yes?
Can I just ask, maybe to move this along?
Please.
Where do you expect that we're going to finish the fiscal year, at the end of April?
This year?
Yeah, where do you expect that we will be in terms of our salaries? Do you have an idea as to ballpark?
Absolutely.
Are we gonna be 15% under the budgeted amount of 2.43, what is it, 436? Or,
Yeah, that's the right number.
73, is it?
No, I want the,
Page 51.
So it just seems like to me that the salary budget is high based on what we're spending this year, unless you're saying we're gonna be adding people.
well, we definitely wanted to be conservative, given we were changing all of these variables. 43, thank you, Mike. The one person that we are adding this year, our marketing coordinator, they will be starting in March, knock wood, and so most of that, you wouldn't see an impact this fiscal year, but we had to make sure we had enough funds for that for next year. The other area where we made sure we had enough to potentially hire additional support was maintenance. We have one full-time custodian, and now that the facilities have been renovated, the standard of cleanliness, I think just by rights of having all new everything is higher. With our old carpet, you might not see that spill. With our old bathrooms, you may not see that during the day, continued use really makes them look pretty dirty. Now that everything's brand new and bright, you can really see what the daily use adds up to be. So we did put in, we did, if you look at the line for maintenance staff, That's on page 73. And you look across that line from the fiscal 19 budget to the fiscal 20 budget. You can see that we put in enough funds there to potentially increase the hours of some of our part-time staff, to potentially bring in additional part-time staff, or potentially have an evening, afternoon, evening, full-time, second maintenance worker. That's not something we determined yet. We felt like it was too early to make that decision, but we wanted to make sure there were funds there should that prove necessary. We could talk through each one by department, and then you could see where some of the funds if that's helpful.
Yeah, I think quickly, if you like library administration, going from 320.
Right.
The forecast is your, what you expect to land this year.
Right.
So you go from 320 to
At least
385.
that was where the city thought we would land.
Okay.
But this also, I mean, these projections also include what we talked about last week about some of the raises, getting people back to where, or getting them to a level where we don't wanna lose them, so we're paying them kind of what market value, those kind of things too, right? And are those numbers reflected based on that conversation we had last week?
So this doesn't reflect like an across-the-board market rate adjustment, we haven't done the study yet. But what it does include is $65,000 for approximately 3% increases based on, right. And a portion of that could be used for these types of corrections for, high-performing staff. But the market adjustments would come after we have the study completed, the analysis. So marketing, this regular salaries under library admin, we increased our part-time marketing coordinator to full-time.
I really would like, do we have an FTE summary by area? That was really sort of, I think I had asked for that.
You did, I apologize.
Because that would be, I mean, all of the salaries are on the top line, and if you look at this run rate, I think if I am hearing Joe's question right is, if you're not adding people, then the numbers should track to what we're doing today. If you're adding people, and because we can't see these head counts, we got a half a marketing person, we got a janitor here, maybe a janitor and a half, I'm sorry, custodian. Is there other, those 2 or 3 people don't make the difference between, make up the $300,000, $400,000 in salary, because we don't know, I don't know where to look in here, because, the assumption of head count is really kind of the driver of the salaries and the benefits.
Okay. At least 3% from line, from budget fiscal 19 to fiscal 20 is just for those increases. Some of the numbers shifted because of transfers. Like for example, on page 73, you see reference goes from $500,000 to nothing.
But I'm looking at the gross salaries.
Right, the
So
gross.
those people, you're taking it out of one pocket and putting it in the other pocket. That doesn't change the top line number.
Sure.
So by looking at are you holding your head count steady?
So,
Are people going, are some departments going to go up? In spite of all the, three-card Monte with the departments.
yes.
And I'm not implying there's,
And maybe then to summarize, right, you basically got an extra custodian, you've got a budget and a marketing person, and I also see children going up, children's services going up, so is there another children's?
Part of that was the transfer of the teen staff to the children's department.
Oh, that's right.
And in addition, we added a 24-hour-a-week teen services assistant. Now that space has to be staffed, I believe that was part of the renovation discussion, that once we relocated the loft, it would have to be staffed every hour that it's open, and we needed some additional staff to help cover that. I wanna make this as transparent and clear and as easy to follow as possible, and I think I'm not talking about it very helpfully, sort of jumping around line by line. I would be happy, Josh did request that, I apologize that I haven't provided that. We added the teen position, we added the marketing, part-time to full-time. But then, to Joe's point, I mean, we didn't replace that manager position. So all of these pieces moving around, it's gonna be a lot easier to see on paper. For me to say, here's what we're looking at doing. Is it an FTE headcount by department? Is it a total headcount overall? What would be the most helpful?
I mean, what I'd like to see is, where were they last year? Fiscal
Departments.
year, 19, and then where will they be in 20? And then, if you, I mean, it should be clear where they came from,
Sure.
depending on how you lay that table out, so that when I look at the bottom line, I say, oh, all right, so I'm seeing -1 manager, +1 custodian, plus a teen services assistant, plus half a marketing. And where are they, so from that, it looks like you're up a head count and a half. That would explain some of it, but I would really like to see that in a form that we could get our hands around. Right now,
But if you're just talking about, what you just said a second ago, moving people from one
Right.
pocket, using money from one pocket to the other pocket, that's not answering the initial question,
Right.
which, so I don't think getting a chart that says this person came from this department.
I don't need that, I don't need the,
I don't think that's
gross
gonna help us
numbers.
figure
Yeah.
out what that money is being used for.
It is, because if your head count is not changing, then your salary line should only be changing by your raises and your,
But do you wanna know that by department, or are
Yeah.
you
I wanna
concerned
know-
with the bottom line?
I'm concerned with the bottom line, but each time we, both, yes, it's really a good question. Because presumably, we're gonna be putting more people in customer-facing positions eventually, correct? Is that part of the philosophy?
More people in customer-facing positions?
Well,
Um,
that's where our best value is provided. I mean, obviously, we have to do the job of the tech services, the job of, shelving, the job of, I mean, we want to see, I think, if we need a custodian because now we got white stuff and we had darker stuff, that's fine, we need to look at that, we should know that. But we can't address the numbers of the salaries and the benefits, which are the bulk of the situation, until we know what you're thinking in terms of how the staff levels are gonna go.
sure.
Heidi, do we have to approve this month? Can I wait?
No, what we talked about at the COW was that March 19th is the next board meeting, and our budget hearing with the city is on the 20th. So if the board were to make changes to the budget between now and then vote to approve that revised budget, at that budget hearing, we could say, what you have in your budget book says this. When the board voted last night, they reduced this line, increased this line, and the bottom line's the same.
So we do have another month.
We have another month. That is the short answer.
So I understood this entire discussion. Joe, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I understood this entire discussion to be centered on this idea that since we're spending right now at the February 15th, we've spent $1,514,000 on salaries, and our budget was $2.436 million. We're far under our budget for this year. Shouldn't we perhaps consider budgeting less for salaries for next fiscal year? Am I correct, Joe?
Absolutely.
Okay,
At
so,
the 75% for the year, we're over $300,000 below our budget. I assume
right,
we're not gonna have any surprise for the last quarter, that's gonna grow to maybe $400,000. yet our salary expectation budget for next year is basically the same. My expectation was, I thought that salary line would come down, so would the benefits line come down, coupled with the fact that the 3% increase we're talking about is 72 grand. That doesn't explain $400,000.
So let me,
But I'm expecting that line to come down, not to stay the same.
So I ran a quick, you know, it seems to me, and Angela, maybe you can confirm this if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that roughly speaking, we're paying about $80,000 every pay period in salaries. That's just what I calculated, extrapolating out,
Yes.
okay? And we have, what, 5 more pay periods in this fiscal year? You know, 1 more in February, 2 in March, and 2 in April, roughly speaking. That's.
There's a third in March.
Yeah. It's every two- it's
Okay, so
every
that's
2 weeks.
that's roughly speaking about $480,000 that we would add on to this figure here, which brings us to about $2 million total paid in salaries for this year. Okay, so I think again, very rough figures, but I think what you need to do is to come back and tell us, does that $2 million in salaries that we paid this year, is it going to change dramatically for next year? Such that we keep this $2.4 million as part of our budget? Or is it going to remain more or less the same? And if it is going to remain more or less the same, then I think Joe has a point. Maybe we should bring down the budget for fiscal '20.
I understand.
And I think also as part of that, I think you should have in there something that outlines these, you know, standards, rates you'd like to bring people up to keep it, you know, to keep them, what did you say before, this, competitive, you know, some of these jumps you'd like to do along with the increase, and include all of that information so we can make.
I mean, but here's the,
We're gonna
here's
talk
his
about that.
point.
If you're.
Steve's point is it's like $78,000, did you say was the?
Yeah,
so-
about 80,000
So
a
you-
pay period.
let's say, yeah, but I mean, the question was how much is dedicated to the 3%? 3% would be
Oh, I forget.
72,000.
72,000. So if we made that 144,000, doubling that amount of money that kind of goes into raises and current staff, right? It still doesn't explain the full $400,000.
It'd be more of a budget of $2 million too.
Yeah, so, I mean, what I'm trying to get at is, if you're going to do some initiatives, like adding a half marketing person, explain that in the narrative, then we can decide whether we want to fund it. Right now, what we're looking at is, you know, the opposite of zero-based budgeting, which is, look at what you got today and carry it forward with a 3% kicker.
The other thing is though, I think to offset this slightly is employee benefits seems to be at a higher rate than the salary, than you would have expected from the salaries in last year's budget. So, because we're 71% through the employee benefits versus 62% through the salary. So I would make sure that if we can get that distribution right too, if you do need to take, it seems to be employee benefits going up more than is it 5% that it might have been? It might be going up at more than that 5%. So I think it might be reflective of moving some of the dollars too from salaries to employee benefits.
If I could make a comment on zero-based budgeting just for a second. We had a discussion, and by we, I mean Joe, the finance committee, Heidi and Angela, about not doing zero-based on the employees until the renovation was done and we figured out what the workload was and where the people were deployed and all those sorts of things.
Well, that's exactly what I was still asking
Right,
for on the
right.
FTE report, because now that, you know, once we get a sense of how the check-ins and all that other stuff lays out, and how the patron services, new patron services initiatives, however Heidi sees 2020, 2021 allocation of her troops, that will help us inform, you know, you can't do the budget unless you know where you're going, what we're thinking of doing. So that's what I'm really just been asking for. Right.
Yes.
That's the skeleton that the whole thing gets built on.
which Angela and I did together,
Right.
but we haven't prepared a report for the board on that.
And the other piece, that's the skeleton, the other piece that I think we've heard loud and clear is, the 2.4 is about 400,000 more than the run rate, so what's in the 400,000?
Sure.
Some of it is raises, some of it's a half a marketing person, or maybe a whole one, since we didn't have the original half a one.
We did have the original half.
I mean, we didn't have the person, right? We didn't have the spending, oh, we did have.
We had a
spending?
half of a person until November,
Right,
so
so we were missing half a person half a year
I see.
in the run rate.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Right, and then the benefits of a full-time versus a part-time is of course part of that whole equation.
Yes.
Okay. Joe, anything else?
All right, yeah, I have one last comment, then we'll close this and we'll move on. As it relates to the study for employees and where they fit in the market, a previous board did an analysis of that a few years ago, and we did adjust a number of people for that. My impression at this point in time is I don't anticipate much, if any, adjustments that we needed, since we just finished that a couple years ago. And the determination that was made back then, which was not that long ago, we were very competitive. We had a few people we needed to adjust for. I don't anticipate that changing, along with the fact that we are not seeing turnover. We are not losing people in the last couple of years to other libraries or other employment opportunities. So in my mind, the data is telling us we have it about right the way we're structured right now. So I don't anticipate this study to provide a whole lot of information that we don't already know, that we're not already seeing in the data. So with that, I'll close it, and we can talk about that later, but I'm ready to move on.
I just had one quick footnote, and it's a minor amount of money, but your consulting budget, if you're planning on doing the My Hometown kind of study and the macro study of the community, and you're planning on doing the salary, I don't know how far $37,000 is gonna take you on those two consulting, rich projects, so just consider, it just seemed, I know we didn't spend any this year, but that doesn't mean, you need a little bit more of a bottom-up thinking, I think, on that.
That's still less than 1%. But
I know, it's,
yeah. And actually, Joe, I don't necessarily agree with your statement in terms of, we haven't lost some good people in the last 2 years. I think you may be thinking of head count, not necessarily the quality of certain employees. But that's,
So we'll ask Heidi to give us a list of who we've lost in the last 2 years.
okay.
That'll be part of our analysis.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, I think, for part of the consulting piece, and for the hometown stuff, we already have a relationship with Gale Analytics, so there's some kind of deal we got through that relationship for advice on polling and methodology.
And for market
marketing
analysis.
To gather information from the community on what they're thinking, that type of thing. Yeah, and I suggested, talking with Karen on that, because I was mentioning the other day that when, and I don't remember the timing, but remember we were talking about getting in touch with dormant users, the people in the community that don't yet have a card, and really understanding why they don't even hold a library card, let alone come in, and the different ways we could reach out to that segment of the community. And it would be, it could be polling, it could be home visits, it could be study groups, and that type of thing. But we were talking about the volume of people you talk to when doing that kind of, or gathering that kind of information, isn't it as important as whether the sample is representative? Because, like you were saying, 1,000 people can tell you how a national election's gonna go. If you have the right 1,000, if your methodology is right and you've got the right demographics, you're talking to the right people, and you're crunching the data correctly. So I just thought that you would be a great person to talk to about that when the time is right, because I know that was one of the things that Karen had raised initially with her marketing background.
Lauren and I, yeah, Heidi talked about that, so yeah, we're on board for that.
I can take another look at that, Josh. In terms of a, market pay analysis, I'm looking at that as being maybe a smaller scale project. When Northbrook just recently had 20 of their job descriptions evaluated, it cost them $6,000 through the HR source that we're a member of. So I think that one is a little less costly than maybe we might imagine. But we'll take another look and make sure that's where it needs to be.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and thank
So-
you for your patience about the FTE count. I apologize that I forgot to provide that.
So Joe, are you looking for a motion to table this?
Yes, I am. So I'll also table the budget discussion until next call.
I'd second that.
Garrett seconds. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Anything else, Joe?
No, that's it, thanks.
Personnel? Over to you, Shar.
Okay, great. So I think most of you got my note for what we accomplished on Monday, and I thought I could just kind of add a little more detail and color to some of the things we talked about, just mainly to keep you completely up to date on some of the different things we talked about. First of all, the job number one is to confirm that we have an FY19 director evaluation sheet that everybody is in agreement with. And I sent that out, and really the main changes were for 2 of the KPOs that we thought were not as important this last year during Heidi's first year because of the renovation, because we were repairing board communication with staff and community and all that, and personnel changes on top of all that. That was a truckload of things on her plate. So we thought it wasn't necessary to put a numerical score next to a strategic plan, since that's really not in play anymore. And then the other thing was, let's see, what did we change?
Community engagement.
Community engagement, because that was something that was being teed up with the communications committee. And I know you guys talked a lot about laying their groundwork, but that was also not something that was top of mind this past year. And so when we look at doing the evaluation and adding the scores for each KPO, if you were to evenly weigh all 7 of those things, that's not really, we feel proper, because community engagement shouldn't have the same weight and score as completing the renovation or some of these other goals. So, but I know Heidi really appreciates feedback, so we want to keep all the KPOs on there so we can all comment and give feedback on everything, or whatever we want to share with her about the future goals. So at the end of the day, those are the 2 big changes. There will be one question about community engagement added into the personnel leadership KPO. So you see the KPOs are stated for questions. There'll be one in there. So there still is a piece of that there that you can kind of consider when putting together your score for personnel leadership. So there'll be 5 scores. We'll average them, and then we'll weight them and average them, and that'll be the process. So we just need a consensus on whether this form is okay with you all, and then take it home, fill it out, get the results back to me by March 1. I'll consolidate them and send them back out to you all. We'll keep the comments anonymous. And then you'll all be prepared when we come in on March 12th's COW to talk about the results and make a compensation decision.
So because I'm new to the process, I just had a question. So we fill out those forms, we send them all to you, you compile them all. Are all the comments included for her, for all the feedback?
Yeah, so what we
Okay.
thought we'd do is, because it is true that, some people they'll be a little more candid if they feel that their names are on it, but at the same time, she deserves to know, I think, what our numerical score is for each of her KPOs from each of the trustees. So we thought, well, the numbers, it'll be transparent what scores everybody gave Heidi. But the comments don't have to be, you don't have to have your name on it. What we thought is, because feedback is so terribly important to her, that she could get the comments and read them, and they'd be anonymous, because I'm just gonna cut and paste them from all in a single document. And then if she had a question or comments, or like, I would really like to flesh that out, I wanna work on this, I wanna ask questions, I really am concerned and I wanna make this a priority for next year. I can go back and ask that trustee, can I tell her that it was you, do you wanna meet with her, do you wanna, because, I know that's kinda how she rolls, right? Sit down, let's talk about it, coach me. So, but you don't have to if you don't want to, because we don't wanna corner a trustee into doing anything you don't want to.
So the scores are all average, or will she see that she got a 3 or 5 of?
So she'll see the numbers from each trustee, but not the comments.
I see. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Unless we all
Unless
agree
we wanna
to
do
make the
something
comments
else.
transparent. I mean, well, one of the things we talked about with Judy was that some people might not be comfortable with confrontation or whatever. So you might want your comments to be anonymous, and you can be more maybe straightforward that way. On the other hand, if 9 of us agree that we're gonna attach our names to our comments, that makes it a whole lot easier both for Shar and Heidi. I mean, we can just send our things directly to Heidi and she can see what I said. So we'd all have to agree with that though. If one person wants them to be anonymous, then we've gotta go now.
Yeah, but as representatives of the community, I think the community should see how we're scoring our CEO. So, I mean, we tried to split the baby there, so.
Well, but I think that begs the question of, the evaluation would not actually be open to the public.
No, it wouldn't. It would be open to us.
No, but at the end of the day, I feel like, the board employs you, and whenever you get, top-down feedback, I've never heard of it being anonymous. Bottom-up feedback, I've heard of 360 feedback, I've heard being anonymous. I've never heard of top-down feedback being anonymous.
We've done it that way in the past.
Well, I'm just talking about my experience in the business world.
We should speak as a board and come to consensus. Now, there may be outlier comments that the board as a whole finds spurious, but are important because there are a perspective that perhaps Heidi should know. But the board as a whole should come to some consensus, and say this is our, as a singular employer.
Right.
She does not have 9 bosses, she has 1 boss.
It's true.
It's the board.
Doesn't the numbers do
Does it
that?
feel that way?
But the numbers are.
Yeah, that's what we were thinking, the numbers do that.
She has
Okay.
17,000 bosses.
But we all have quite different personalities, and
No.
her other
And
ask
perspectives.
was that we work to kind of consolidate the overall direction of the board, because to the extent that feedback can be conflicting, she's like, let me know what the board wants, because there's only one board, there's 9 of you.
Right.
So, yeah, it's hard to kind of walk that line, but I mean, whatever you think, we can talk about this, there's no, solid.
I think there's something to be
Concrete
said
thing that we
for hearing 9 different opinions, and the reason is, I think we might have all experienced Heidi pulling us aside and saying, hey, how about this thing, I don't quite understand, and, I'd like to make it better, kind of thing. That's one of her strengths, in my opinion. And if we sort of, as a board, censor those spurious comments or outliers out of the performance appraisal, she won't have the benefit of being able to try to rectify something with an individual, if it's just an individual.
I think you missed my point.
Oh, okay.
My point is that if in the discussion with the board, let's say we have, somebody comes up with Heidi has terrible taste in tile, right? And 8 of us disagree with that. Well, you can still say one of the board members, but it is not the consensus of the board.
Oh, right.
That feels that your tile ability should be delegated.
Okay, got it. I understand.
All right.
Yeah, well, I didn't plan on editing and summarizing
No.
the evaluation,
Right.
it's just going raw into one document, and we're gonna send it. But I mean, I guess when we all get it in front of us, then we can decide what we wanna do with it before we share it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Steve?
So just one comment, and I'm all for having all transparency, and I'm comfortable giving my comments and having my name on them, but I think what we need to consider is if someone in our group is not, and we all vote that we should do this very transparently with our name on every sheet, then we risk the danger that the person who is, or the people who are uncomfortable will water down their comments and will not provide real feedback. I think that's the danger in my mind, because, you know, if we go around and take a straw poll and 8 of us say, yeah, we're gonna put our names on it and give the feedback, and the one person who's hesitant, or 2 or 4 or 5 or 10 people, or, you know, 9 people, they'll all be like, oh no, I'm for it, but you may
Let's take a
get.
straw poll.
So, no, but my point is, if one person doesn't feel that way, and the rest of the group does, they may go along with it, but water down their comments, is the point. That's the risk.
My sense is collect them from 9 individuals, put them in a pile, and then let's just chew through them as 9, as a unified board. And if you get 9, your tile taste sucks, then you know you got a problem with the whole board. If it comes out once, maybe not, right?
And you know I didn't pick the tile.
Wait a minute.
I picked the tile.
Make a note of it. You know, another thought in terms of efficiency, if, you know, this is still anonymous, let's say you fill out the whole form and you send it to Shar, and then she takes the names off of them and gives them to me. She doesn't put them all together into one, she gives me all 9 of them, but there's no name on it. And then if there's a problem with that, like if I'm like, ugh, I would really like to talk to this one person, could you see if they would have coffee with me? Then you could do that, you could facilitate that, and you know, I think that would be okay by me, and we could try that and see, and just take their names off the form, give me all 9 forms, and then when I read them, if there's, oh my gosh, I'm getting feedback all over the place, they think I love my tile, they hate my tile, and they think, you know, the tile is
It'll be evident
a
if she
moot
puts them
point.
all in one place. It'll be evident that we've either clustered or not.
Sure,
Yeah.
and when I read them, then I could come back and say, I do have one question. Next time when I pick tile, I feel like I could only please if you, and I didn't even pick the tile. You know, and
So
then we
chairs,
could
let's see
discuss and maybe achieve a consensus from the board on any potential outliers that way.
Yeah, that's why I presented that as, you know, you
I
can.
was just asking.
Yeah, keep your name off, and then if there's something she's curious about, then it can be up to you as an individual. But, you know, we can also revisit this after we get everything in front of us, but, you know, without rehashing the whole personnel committee, that's kind of what we're doing. Yeah. All right, so moving on.
I would like to just basically say, that you were asking if the form was okay. I think it's excellent.
Okay, good. So do we have a consensus on that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so good, then you can.
One comment, Heidi, I think you're getting defensive about the tiles.
I'll tell you later.
You really picked it, didn't you?
Yeah.
I'll tell you the things I picked. I picked the 3 most
Just kidding.
colorful things in the project.
Oh,
Okay.
You can
yes.
probably guess.
So homework is due March 1, and our cow is March 12th.
So we're taking the form that you gave to us
Yes.
today and filling it out.
Except since we didn't change it
And
yet.
March 1st is a week and a half away.
Yeah, it's a week and a half should be.
Friday.
Yeah, Friday.
So you only have to produce 5 numbers, and comments are optional and 7 KPIs, so it should be pretty simple. All right,
I will just ask, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
If you give me a 1 or a 3 on something, that's where I'd really like the comment. You know, if it exceeds expectations, well, why did it exceed? If it fell below expectations, why? If you're like, oh, that's pretty good, and you give a 2, and there's not a comment, I think that wouldn't pique my curiosity and my need for, you know, feedback as much as a 1 or a 3 would, if that's helpful.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so staff and public input, somebody raised a 360 review. Judy and Mike and Heidi and I all were pretty unanimous in thinking, it was year one, there was a huge renovation, there were all these things. It's just too soon. We can do this, and I know Heidi loves feedback, so she wants to do this, but a formalized, 360 process with input from staff, input from the public, input from everybody, just a little too soon. So we're just gonna get through this first formal process, and then we'll talk about that, but we also thought, Heidi, we're gonna leave it to her, if she wants to gather informal feedback, she'll find a method, maybe we talked about some different ways that maybe she could do that, because she does care, it starts getting late, about how, she's perceived in doing her job and what she can improve on, so that's still an option out there, even though it's not part of the formalized process the board's gonna participate in. Let's see, we, also talked about the board discussion, including compensation. So once we get the consolidated feedback in front of us, March 12th, of course Heidi said, I'd like to go into closed when we talk about money, I'd like to go into closed to talk about my feedback. So, we are a very transparent board, but we have to be sensitive to personnel issues and to our employee. So, we just talked about that, that's her expectation, and we also talked about the fact that Amanda had probably already prepared something to remind us what the rules are and that we could circulate that. Because we will all take that vote March 12th, into personnel. And there will be an executive session or closed session note on the agenda for that.
And I did look for that, and unfortunately, I haven't found an official communication to the board, but I found the news article.
Okay.
That has, Julie Tabendorf's recommendation to discuss employee performance only in closed meetings, and that, performance evaluations be, part of the personnel file. So I can continue to look, you've seen my office, I've got the boxes of paper stacked up in there. We've been searching electronically, but, Angela didn't remember a memo from Amanda about that, so we'll keep looking.
Yeah, let's keep looking, because I just remember that, our firm before Ansem Blank said, oh no, the city reviewed the city manager's personnel file and evaluation in public.
The previous city manager.
Yeah, the previous city manager, but that was the previous firm too. Then we had Ansem Blank and they said no, and then we went back to, went to a third firm with Amanda.
Oh,
Amanda Coleman.
Robin Schwartz.
Schwartz, thank you. And I just thought that they had kind of a different take, and I can't recall exactly, so I'll ask her about it, because I don't want to have her produce an opinion and pay for it. I feel like we already went down that road. But I just thought that's just good to know, because that's what we'll all ask. Okay, well, what's the law on this again? So I just want to be prepared for March 12th, so we get in, get out, no one gets hurt, get it done.
Except for Tile's reputation.
Yeah.
It's a mystery. It's a mystery.
We talked about the weighting of the KPOs, we think now that we've taken out those two that aren't gonna be a numerical score, we think we have that straight, all five are probably of equal importance. We talked about calculating score each KPO, there's 9 of us, we'll just divide it, average it, and then there'll be 5 averages, and then we'll average those. But if, when we all meet, we wanna change that, edit it, give weight to something we hadn't thought about before, like Josh said, that's at our discretion when we look at holistically what all the feedback and numbers are before we pass it on to Heidi. And then she'd like to know how the score will translate into compensation, so we're not just, making it up as we go along. And, what should be budgeted, because remember, we have that $65,000 in a pool for all merit-based raises. And Heidi's raise, assuming she has a raise, is coming out of that $65,000. So she can't make decisions on how to spend that 65 unless she knows what to set aside for her, which is up to the board. And then, of course, the scores are 1, 2, 3. How does that translate into a raise? Is it
is a 3, this percent, is a 2, this percent. So what we came down on is very broad. It's sort of like when we can't make a decision and we put a motion on the agenda that says we'll spend up to this dollar amount. And at least we have that there, but we haven't made the final purchase. Well, that's what we did. So the scores are 1, 2, and 3. So 1 is below expectations, 2 is met, and 3 is exceeds. So what we thought is, anything overall score, at the end of the day, all 9, everything averaged down. If it's below a 2, of course, there would be no raise. You didn't meet expectations. And so that's for sure. And then we were thinking anywhere between a 2 and a 3. So 2, 2.1, 2.2, going up all the way to 3, which is the max. What would that range be? And we came down on 5%. So the salary range, the merit increase for Heidi, for what we gave her for guidance to save for herself, possibly out of the $65,000, was a 5% raise for herself, which would be about $5,000. So once we get the feedback in front of us, that's kind of the pool we have to play with for her, between $0 and up to $5,000. And it just seemed to make sense, because I'm not married to a number. We can't know that is until all the trustees have put their feedback into the hopper. But Heidi did make a good point. We asked her what she thought of that, and she said, well, she talked about her initially hiring and some discussions we had, and it made sense. So that's
can I make
for the pool.
Comment on that?
Mm-hmm.
As you evaluate your employees, will a similar framework be used to determine raises?
So I'm gonna be talking with the managers more about that, but in my experience, one of the best ways across multi-departments who are using the same, evaluation tool, albeit some different criteria, is to have a score range tied to a percentage as a base. So a score of X to Y might be 2%, and Y to Z might be 3%. And then from there to have the managers to have the ability to say, okay, here's why I think this person ought to be X. And have an opportunity to operate outside of those parameters as well.
Okay, so here are my thoughts. The way we've presented this as a $65,000 pot, it becomes a zero-sum game. And I don't like the feeling of that. Okay, so that's one. The second aspect is, if Heidi is eligible for a 5% raise, and the max any other employee can get is 4%, I don't like the optics or the feeling. That doesn't feel right to me either. So that's sort of what I kind of have in the back of my mind. I want to, for future budgets, we need to, I think, separate in our mind the pool of money for the director from, and if you don't get it all, you don't get it all, but it's not a, we took $5,000 out for you, and now there's only $60,000 for the rest of the team. And so I don't like, I realize this is not an organized statement, but I just want you to be sensitive, because we have had this situation where people in city departments got raises and our guys didn't, right? And that's bad enough.
But we're deciding how much that 65 she gets, not her.
I get that.
And I did ask if there was a cap on what all the other employees did, because I know in past years we've said that, and I thought the answer was no. I mean, granted, I fell off the end of the last week, but
Right.
I thought there were no caps, so we never said what, because it's all on merit. So some people could get 0 and some people get 8%, I don't know, that's in Heidi's
Right,
discretion.
I just want you to be, I want everybody to be sensitive about this. And thank you, that was the other point I wanted. I don't think any department head should say, all my people are all the same.
Amen.
3%.
That's right.
So that's not what I think we expect, and I don't think you would expect that, but I just want to underscore that in our discussion.
Yeah.
One of the things we've done in the past that I think is probably very empowering for the people running this organization is say, we approve a total pot of money, you split it up however you want to. This is the philosophy.
Right.
The philosophy is merit. Angela argued passionately last year for raises for everybody, which was contrary to what we had done the prior year or two, because some people got bonuses instead, and we agreed with that. But we've always said, we're not deciding percentages, we're not deciding how you split it up among people, departments, whatever. What we are asking is that you give merit-based raises, and therefore, by definition, the better people do better on the raises. I'd hate for us to get involved in basically any more than that.
Okay.
Because we don't know who the employees are, or what they do.
And we
Right.
don't have any transparency into any employees other than height, so it's not for us to judge.
So,
It-
right,
or
so
it's
that,
difficult- It's more difficult.
that said, we had to, I had to give Heidi some guidance on how much money to set aside.
Yes.
That could cover her raise. The amount was $5,000. And we also, the past few years, have said, if you have high-performing employees who you believe to be underpaid, we are willing to listen to one-time adjustments. So there is, it's not really a zero-sum game. I guess,
Okay,
is where
thank you
I'm
for
getting to that.
reminding me.
And that's outside of the 65,
Right.
these two roles were combined. We moved this
Right.
manager over here and he or she got more responsibilities, and there were some things like that that hadn't been addressed. We want that to come before the board. Those people still need to be compensated more if they're doing more, or if there's a job that's way under market. I mean, we talked about one individual specifically that we felt was not being valued. So, I mean, all those extras, that's market or job consolidation, that's not merit. So that's stuff that we want Heidi to bring to the board too. I mean, if someone
Right. But again,
deserves
not
that,
by
we wanna
name.
hear it.
Right. In the past, the temporary directors, the interim directors, spoke with Judy. Before that, Jan spoke with Judy and said, here's what I'm recommending, and Judy would take the other side of it, the devil's advocate side, and say, no, or whatever she said. But all we got in the end was, there's 4 employees, here's what it's gonna cost. I never even knew the names of whoever they were. This
Okay.
year, we don't have Judy. We thought it was probably inappropriate for Judy, who's not a trustee anymore, to be doing this, so we suggested the head of the personnel committee would fill that role, so one person will know who's been proposed and who's been agreed to, and they'll give us a report on how many people and how much money. Does that sound reasonable?
Perfect.
I think it sounds reasonable, again, so long as we have some distance between us micromanaging
Right.
what
Right,
people
yeah.
get,
Right.
because,
Right.
you know.
But it's just, some representation to kind of look from the board
Right.
to look at some of this. But, we just wanna be, just so the staff knows, there's always these individual situations, and we're not gonna be like, nope, you're all, we've lost good people in the past, and I still remember that, and I don't ever want that to happen again. I don't want that to happen.
I
There's
apologize that I have to leave the meeting. I
Okay.
have another meeting we're supposed to be
Thank
at.
you, Pat.
So can I just clarify one point, if I fall asleep? We're talking a lot about raises. I thought we were giving raises as a one-time adjustment, and generally speaking, we're looking at giving bonuses. Or did I fall asleep
No.
in one of these
We haven't gotten
meetings?
to that part yet.
We haven't gotten to that part yet?
I'm
or-
sorry, we've been talking about giving raises.
we've never been
Unless-
talking about bonuses this year.
This year?
No.
Then I must have fallen asleep in one of the meetings, I apologize. I
And that
was
doesn't
under-
mean we couldn't talk about it.
I was under the impression that we're completely changing direction from how we've operated the entire time I've been a trustee then.
Well, last year, we gave all raises.
That was, I understood that as a one-off,
Oh,
that we were doing that as a one-off.
Well, no,
the year before that. it
almost
was-
all the components are there. It's still a relatively small merit pool. And then it's still based on merit, and it's gonna vary depending on the individual. So those two things haven't changed.
So,
The only thing is, it is a true raise instead of a.
You've also been operating in an environment of zero inflation over the last 5, 6 years, and so that's not necessarily the case these days. Something we're thinking about.
well, and Steve, we could follow up on this, as well, but in the cow, packet from, last week, in my, I'm looking for it, here it is. In my memo that we only briefly discussed it, and we said that we come back to this in March for further discussion. My comment about the bonuses was that, strictly speaking, if you make the midpoint the maximum to receive
I
an
remember that
increase.
comment, yes.
Right, so, I think, you know, it sounds like you're saying, some further discussion would be helpful, and I think we have that on the March committee, to address. And if I may, I don't mean to switch topics, but Josh, I really appreciate your comment about the zero-sum game, because, I actually was gonna bring this up. I talked to Angela about it earlier today, that after our conversation and sleeping on it, I woke up feeling like, wow, whatever I ask for is what my people won't get. And that really troubled me. And I felt like that's sort of like a no-win situation, because if, you know, the short game is, well, let's take care of the people. In the long game, you know, what does that mean for my compensation and, you know, how I feel, if I feel valued in 5 years? Do you know what I mean? The idea that saying, I think this should be my raise, please. In the same breath, I'm saying, and don't give that to take that away from me so I can't give it to my staff. The idea of having it be a separately budgeted amount would sure make me feel better. And I realize we already had the discussion, so we're kind of in this already.
Yeah, because it's not up to you. I mean, we're gonna decide whether you get a penny of that, lady.
Of course
But,
you are.
but I know that, like, everybody's like, I wanna raise, everybody in their job, like, I wanna be recognized, I wanna get a raise, I wanna get a bonus. I mean, every year we want, so you want those things, and that is taking you away, because it is, I mean,
right.
Your secret wish is what you feel bad about, because it's not really your decision, but I get it.
Sure.
I mean, that perception, and I don't know how to fix that.
I don't either, but
So-
that's why I brought it.
I think separate budgeting
It
is
would
the
have to
best
be-
way. So
I don't
next
know
year we should separately budget it. I think it's
Well,
important,
definitely
right?
next year, I mean, there'd be a pool for the
Right.
director, I'm just saying for this year, how do we remedy that? Because we've already voted on we already
Can I ask
had a
one
decision on
question?
65.
Just because you brought that up, do you not feel that the pot of money, you're able to work with that pot of money with what the kind of raises you'd like to do? Is that what you're concerned with? If you take part of that pot of money, do you not think you have enough to work with?
So.
Or, you know, like, is that your concern? Because
In terms of the merit increases and what we were looking at, we looked at an average of 3%, you know, for each individual, which to Shar's point will probably range from 0 to potentially 8%.
Anything, right.
Right, I mean, it will depend on the evaluation and then also where, you know, I mean, we'll have to look at everything. We can't just say, oh yeah, we'll have someone who's 8%. We might not,
Right.
but, and if, you know, to Shar's point, we're not setting a limit. We're gonna see how the scores come in and take a look. I think to me, it's not, oh, there's not enough money. It's sort of like I woke up in the morning and felt like, you know, I'm asking for a consideration that means I don't have it to give to my staff. So it's not that I feel like 65 is not enough to do what we'd like to do for the staff for merit.
You're competing with them.
That's how it feels.
That's right.
That's how
That's
it
the
feels.
feeling.
And then who do I advocate for?
It's a
Right.
conflict of interest question.
Right. And, you know, if I advocate for them, in the long run, am I gonna have a resentment? If I advocate for myself, oh, okay, that's crappy, right? You know, I mean, then you're hanging your crew out to dry. So to maybe avoid that as even a situation, I think would be great.
but what's great for you is it's not your choice. It's
Absolutely.
our choice of how much of that dollar amount we want to offer you. So that does take a little off of you, because this year at least, that's kind of the pot of money we're working with, and that's, I understand though.
But I think
Heidi
that-
is in direct, she's
sits around this table with us, she talks to us, so there could be a perception that she could advocate for herself more than she could advocate for the staff. So it could just be a perception issue too, and it's better to just nip that in the bud.
Right, well,
Even though it is ultimately our decision.
and
You're not gonna have the staff come in and start advocating for themselves over you, right?
I
It's just
was
a
never on a
perception.
board that gave Jan a raise.
Joe, are you still there?
Jose?
I am, I'm on mute.
Hey, Joe, do you remember how we did this in years, like, where we had a pool of money, a preset finite dollar amount for all bonuses, raises, whatever? How did we handle Jan? Was she part of that, or did we just do that separately? Why was this not an issue before? Maybe she just, maybe,
My recollection, that Jan was part of the overall pool.
that's how I remember it too, and she never raised this concern.
well, and just to be, I mean, as forthright as possible, 100%, the decision lies with the board. That doesn't mean that I might not try to negotiate. And to try to negotiate when I know that anything I advocate for myself is less than I have for my staff is where I feel the difficulty. And maybe there won't be any negotiation. And, you know, what ifs is kind of the game I'm playing with this. But I think it would just be cleaner to say, Heidi, you'll be able to do X for staff.
Okay, so how do you feel about the fact that we didn't anticipate this? And to your credit, you're the only library director that we've had that cared enough about the staff to even think to raise it. So what does that mean? That says such great things about your leadership. Do we fix this issue? Do we move forward? Do we just make it clear that the board made a mistake? Maybe we should have 2 different pools next year. We'll do that to, you know, avoid this issue. But for the moment, I mean, we can't just pile on more money. So how do you feel about that? I mean, I don't know how to bifurcate that pool.
I might have an answer to that from a pragmatic
Oh,
standpoint.
good.
In the past, we've approved raises twice. And I think we were going down that path this time as well, because we've done the budget and we've said, here's a budgetary amount, but we are not agreeing that that's the amount you get to spend.
Mm-hmm.
Then the director comes back after all the performance appraisals are done and after all the raises are done and says, I came up with this amount of money, it's within your budget, it's X% on average, what do you think? And we approve it again. Now, we didn't say it that way yesterday, but I thought we sort of talked all the way around it.
Well, we
And-
did, because we said that we didn't spend every last penny
Right.
last year. There was a little bit left over.
Right, so, you know, theoretically, in that kind of scenario, if Heidi wants to spend a little bit more and can justify it to the board and say, I know it's not in the budget that we turned into to the city, but here's where I'm gonna save it from, you know, I can do this and still meet the budget, then there's a way to spend a little bit more. You know, there's a way to spend less, so there, you know, there's a way to spend more too. But right now, the number is just a budgetary number. We need to approve in total what the raise pool is.
Mhm.
And that always happens in April, I think, so that it can be done for the May payroll.
Well, and I would advocate for potentially doing that concurrent with the budget approval, knock wood, in March. So I would propose that, you know, when Angela and I go back to the plan we created, where we looked at every single position, and we said, here's how much money we think we need, you know, to safely make this transition, to not be caught with our pants down, to have, you know, funds for some of these extra needs. We provide that summary to the board, and when she and I take a look, we can make sure to, you know, clearly show where, you know, how, what we're thinking in terms of FTE, and when she and I take a look, and we, you know, maybe we say, we think we're gonna end the budget at 97%, that's still $100,000 of cushion. Maybe the board could consider that as both, you know, sort of the best practice, that we'd end with a 3%, and a potential pool. I'm not asking for a $100,000 raise, I'm just saying, you know, if we're saying 97% spent, then,
Right.
you know, 3% is over $100,000. And we could operate, the board could operate within that. So maybe she and I could fulfill your request, Josh, so that you have the information you all need to make these decisions. And we could have both of these on the agenda for March, both the salary plan and the overall budget that supports it. Do you think that's feasible?
Yeah.
I think that's reasonable. I think the other piece of information that we talked about too, not that we're going to adhere to it, but it's just another piece of data, is what's the city doing in terms of a percentage, and we still haven't heard that.
No, we haven't received that yet.
So,
Well, I don't have anything else for personnel.
I don't want to belabor the conversation, but I just want to thank you all for your engaged discussion. I mentioned to the personnel committee that, you know, a lot of times when I talk with other library directors, you know, they'll say, oh, they don't read the packet, or, oh, you know, it's hard to get them here, or, oh, it's hard to get a real opinion out of somebody. And I was like, not me, you know, and I brag. I'm like, you're jealous, aren't you? Seriously, apathy. I do. Apathy is a word I would never consider using, and I know that in some boards, that's a challenge that other directors face. I really appreciate the candid discussion, so thank you very much.
all set?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Friends of the Library reports.
Okay, I've got 3 things. In our March newsletter, as we have in years past, we will support our friends with their membership drive. There'll be an envelope inside the newsletter for people to join the Friends. And if you haven't yet, I'm sure they would love to see your envelope and generous check. On March 1st, the Friends are talking about accepting donations again. We don't have their workspace quite completed yet. We still have some work to do there, but they're still anticipating that is the date to start receiving donations.
That's physical donations, not money.
Physical donations, yes, donations of materials. So John has been wonderful reimagining that space for us, reutilizing old furniture. He's gonna have an excellent setup for them. And then when you see a friend, please thank them for the generous donation that they made to the holiday luncheon. This luncheon is for staff, past staff, trustees, past trustees, friends of the library, volunteers, past and present. And it was really thoughtful of them. They suggested that, like, that wasn't part of our request that we normally make. And that was tremendous. The staff really felt honored by the Friends with that. And the library administration met the donation, and so we provided the food together for that event. The staff did a tremendous job planning a value yet delicious luncheon. Staff provided desserts. It was a great party for less than $500, and the sense of community.
We'll let you do my daughter's wedding.
Yeah. The sense of community was excellent. Josh received a round of applause for reading the board statement, and I think the Friends are just tremendous advocates for us. So thank a friend.
Also, I think that the Friends may be looking for a new president soon. So, I don't know what the history in terms of giving the current co-presidents the library award is. We
Didn't
can
they
research
already-
for that.
Didn't they already receive?
The Dussaults, you're nodding, Laura.
I think
I
they
just don't
already
remember.
received it, I think.
Yeah, I just don't remember. Apparently, they've been co-presidents for 45 years.
Well, nominations are
A
open,
couple of
so
years ago in the basement.
please consider nominating them, and we'll.
I just don't want, if there's somebody else, we should recognize that. But
Sure.
I had a question.
My wife read something to me about if you go to Whole Foods or something like that, they're giving donations to the Friends of the Library.
Yes.
Can you explain what that's all about?
Laura, can you do that for us?
Absolutely. So you go to Whole Foods, you bring your own bag, which I of course always do. And they'll give you a 10-cent bag credit if you bring your own bag, but they give you the option to donate it to a charity. So it's a 3-month period, Angela. So January, February, March, all those donations are going to the Friends of the Library.
Nice.
Which I found out when they told me in January, and I was like, are you sure? Because I haven't heard anything about this.
Because didn't they accidentally say Parkridge Library?
They did, and I was like, what? What? So, close
Forgot
enough.
Friends of.
Was that in the newsletter or something? Or where, my wife got it somewhere?
Was it an email?
I saw that on
She told
Facebook.
me.
I think I saw that on Facebook.
It was on Facebook?
And was there an email?
Okay.
Was it part of the email blast? It was just on Facebook. Okay.
Shouldn't we publicize that somewhere?
Yeah.
Like put a sign downstairs or something like that?
Did our team kick that out on Twitter as well? I feel like I saw it
Probably.
from all of our social outlets.
Okay, anything more on Friends?
No, thank you.
Unfinished business, except for Gareth, because we're gonna hold him till last. Sorry.
That's all right.
No unfinished business, new business? Okay, Gareth has an issue that we might vote to go into closed session on. That's the only reason I wanted to hold him till last. And,
Okay, do you want me to, so Mike and I and Heidi spoke with the legal counsel this afternoon with regards to the discussion we had last month, you know, I had made some recommendations to open some meeting, or partially or redacted versions. There's a bunch, and I'll summarize them in a second, but we spoke with him about his recommendations not to open them up and the reasoning behind it. And, you know, I think overall he said everything is optional, but he gave us some of the reasoning behind what he was thinking. So I'll take them kind of, there's 4 buckets, 3 which we've already discussed, and the 4th one which I'm about.
Do we want to talk about closed session? Well, one of the things he said, and I wrote down his quote, he really encourages closed session to discuss these meeting minutes.
I agree, because I feel like the one time when we were openly talking about it, the thing I wanted to say, I said it out loud, and then we were all like, this should really be in closed session. So I feel like it almost tongue-ties you a little bit if you can't be in closed session.
Someone wants to make a motion?
I'll move to go into closed session.
And under the part of the act that actually says, I can find it, that allows you to discuss closed session minutes in closed session. There's a line item in the act to go into that.
Yes,
So,
I move on that.
I would second on the basis of stating that we will just come back from closed session to end the meeting so that people who are leaving don't have to hang around.
Yes, when we come back from closed session, we may vote on which of these to open up, and that will be the only piece of business.
Unfortunately, we can't.
Oh, we can't?
Because it's not on the agenda.
Okay, never mind.
I just need consensus to bring it back next month, so we don't have to have this discussion next month. We can just move and vote on it.
So the only thing we're gonna do after the closed session is close the meeting.
Yes.
So we have a first and a second, a question?
Definitely.
Gretchen?
Did you still want the demo?
Yeah,
The self-check?
let's adjourn for the self-check in demo, and then come back up and finish what you think.
We can take the motion, so then they can, on the record, and then,
Okay.
have a 5-minute break.
Very good.
So,
Any discussion on the motion?
sorry, I got Lauren as the proposer.
And Karen seconded.
Can we have a vote, please, or can you call the vote, please?
Yes. Drabilovich.
No.
Kime.
Yes.
Lamb. Rappasan.
Yes.
Reardon.
Yes.
Paul-Sagerman.
No.
Kennedy's no. Egan.
No?
Yes.
6. Oh, you're right, sorry.
It's okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
Berkham, sorry. I thought I was home. I'm sorry. It's never been this close before. Okay, we have an official tie. I don't know what happens. I don't think we've had that before. Is it Mike's casting vote, or do we just, does the motion fail because it didn't get a
If the
majority?
motion fails, you don't have a majority.
Okay. That's how it works. Okay.
Okay.
Motion fails.
We can either postpone or discuss it in open session.
You can speak carefully.
Okay.
You know, I have a question. I'm just gonna throw this out there. I don't like closed sessions. But we have an attorney, we employ the attorney to give us legal advice. And he tells us we really should go into closed session to discuss this. And if we don't believe what the advice our attorney's gonna give us, why would we be paying this person? Why wouldn't we find someone who we believe and trust?
Because it's a
That's just a
recommendation.
question, yeah.
It was, we could take it or leave it. It wasn't like you must, or you will break the law. This absolutely has to, it doesn't bind your vote.
And your attorney is extremely risk averse. He's there to protect all
course.
of your interests.
And
I'm just not sure that we're gonna discuss anything that's that.
And we're talking about opening up
Yeah.
closed minutes. It's like, I just think we should be able to, we're intelligent people, we should talk about the abstract.
If one of the no's then feels like they wanna change their, as I talk, just stop me, you can always propose another motion.
It's fine.
Okay, so the 4 categories, the first one was about, there was a director review, set of meeting minutes, but there was, at the end, there was a discussion, you may recall, around, it said it had nothing to do with the director's review, and it had at the top of the meeting minutes, these most probably are not IOMA compliant and shouldn't be closed. That section discussed certain things about outside counsel and potentially changing outside counsel, and nothing to do with the motion that put you into closed session. The lawyer, our legal counsel, said that he thought it was airing a little bit of dirty laundry, and it was not a professional courtesy to the other legal firm. So I think his I don't know if it was lawyer the lawyer that was clouding his judgment, or whether it was just a profession. So that, I thought that one, to me, felt like we should just open it up. It says nothing to do with the
That's
motion.
professional courtesy. I couldn't have I totally disagree with that.
But agree to open it.
Yes.
Is there a
Which is why it
consensus
was in the
to?
minutes, because that following that's why I wrote the minutes that way, because that discussion was just talk about a vendor, and it wasn't anything about the reason we went into closed. So we had no right, I mean, it never was closed to begin with. So there's no question about opening it up, it never was closed, in my opinion.
I agree with Sean.
And yeah, it's embarrassing, too bad. We didn't like our firm, and the public can see what we said about them. It's what we said.
There were a lot worse things said in open session.
That have been said, absolutely.
So what's the point of this discussion? We're just making,
I'm
we're
trying
just
to
saying
get
that
a
we're-
consensus.
I'm trying to get a consensus
All
to
right,
know
as
if
to
I.
whether we should vote on this.
This
at
one
the next
seems
board
pretty
meeting.
Yes.
straightforward.
This one's okay?
Put it to a vote.
Yeah.
Okay, that one's okay, all right. The second one is about, you may
But just the part after the director,
of course, that's all that was
Right.
proposed originally.
Right.
yes.
That was all that I came
Right.
back
Yeah.
with.
So by
Okay.
consensus,
That one's a yes, that one's a
Yes.
yes. Okay, there's an old note where you may remember there was a phrase there that seems like it might be a scrivener's error. But we can't tell that because it was done a long time ago before anybody was on the board. And there were some minutes there that talked about
It was a recommendation of the lawyer to change change those
Well,
minutes.
he wanted to amend the minutes.
Yes, which
and
we can't do.
we can't do, so we agreed that most probably the best solution there is just to redact that word.
Or alternatively, just open them up.
Yeah, you could do it, but, yeah.
Without.
my sense is,
one.
we didn't close it, we shouldn't open it. We don't have the context, we don't have the people, we don't know whether that was an error or not, it should just remain closed.
You could just redact the word.
We could, but I don't know the context. I don't feel confident voting on something I know nothing about.
But if I'm a member
You
of the
read them,
public,
they
I
were
wanna-
available to you.
Right.
I wanna see it, and I wanna judge, and I can make the determination that it was a scrivener's error, and as a member of the public. Let me be the judge.
I think we should just open them as is.
I do
If anybody
too.
asks a question about it is a single word 3 times in the document that somebody believes is an error. If anybody asks a question, it can be answered.
Right, and can say, we have those minutes.
Yes.
We've tried to talk over that. Okay, I think we just release them as is without, that
You
would
can't
be
make
my
that
thought.
decision tonight.
You
No,
can't.
no,
No,
but
we'll
we're
do
trying
this.
to get
We can
What
do
to
the
put on the
consensus.
next agenda.
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay.
Can I get consensus then? That sounds like the.
Yes.
yeah.
I don't remember the
I-
word.
I would
I'm
say-
so sorry. I
I
think,
don't
I
It's
have a
pretty
hard
all- it's-
time doing the consensus if I don't
Yeah,
know what I'm
okay.
talking about.
You can vote on it.
It's basically an error because recordings have to be destroyed, but if you have evidence that you actually have the things that they misspoke about, you actually have them around it, then it's obviously an error.
We have to retain minutes, and we have all of those
Yes.
minutes.
Yes. They meant recordings.
Because you're not allowed to do that.
Right.
Right. That's why.
So they
Okay.
mistyped.
They mistyped.
Okay,
You're allowed to destroy recordings.
I understand.
That's easy to explain.
Yes.
Okay, all right. That one,
I'm sorry, I just couldn't remember.
Scrivener's error is consensus is to bring that back next.
These are
The third area is around patrons, which is probably the most sensitive area. There, I think the balance is between a duty to public safety versus a duty to, let sleeping dogs lie, I think is maybe the best term I could put, well, from what I was hearing from the legal counsel.
I'd rephrase that a little bit. It's we're trying to balance a duty to inform versus a risk to public safety. Is that fair?
He did say that, yes, you could increase the risk by reissuing the matter.
My sense, I've thought about this. Our security in the library, we don't carry guns, our security in the library is through the city department, fire, and police. They have their own minutes, they have their own spokesman, they have their own resources. It's their job to make this public statement or not. We dealt with the patron issue, we dealt with an employee issue. I don't think it's our place to second guess whether the cops are bearing it or not.
I will say this is the one, when I read through all of the notes not being on the board prior to this year, after reading through all the closed session notes, this is the one that I brought my attention to that said I felt very strongly this should stay closed, and I still feel very strongly it should stay closed. And I think it also goes back to that I think it was in several closed sessions, and the last closed session was the one that gave the finale of what actually happened with said situation. And I know a lot of that we talked about redacting and not sharing, and I felt if you're giving part of the story, you have to give the full story, and I still feel very strongly that this story is not one that needs to be told from our point of view. If it's something that was shared from the police department or something like that, I think that's fair for them to do, but I still feel strongly to keep it closed.
I agree with that one.
The guidance I wrote down from the attorney is, although we can open this if we want to legally, the best practice is to keep it closed on these patron issues, both A and B.
Well, there are third parties that were brought in at the end, and those are other people in the sphere of that person, and that would be really inappropriate, I think, to. There are parts in there I just don't think they're really deeply personal.
They are heavily
I struggle
redacted
with that.
is what.
Are they heavily?
They were heavily, the
I know.
proposal is with the heavily redacted
Even after the
ones.
redaction, my sense is,
And that's gonna
We're
bring
not
up
in the
more
business of
questions than it's
making-
gonna give answers.
Yeah, but
to
and
folks.
then at the other end, I'm like, this always should have been known. Because then, if I were a member of the public, I would have, I really struggle with this one.
I don't call the library for my security, I call the cops.
But that's
And
true,
the
I
cops
mean,
are their business. It's their business, it's their decision they have to weigh the copycat possibility with the, you know, and I would like to retain the flexibility. I don't want the cops to say, I don't wanna get involved with the library, cause those guys, you know,
Some of the other.
right? I want them to do their job, and we did our job.
My view is to agree to follow the advice of our lawyer on this one.
I agree.
And a couple of the other comments that he made was, you know, something so recent.
Yeah.
And then, you know, to just summarize what Mike said, yes, transparency is of vital importance for operating a government agency, but there's also competing interests to be considered with a topic like this, just to add to your comments.
I mean, I would refer a FOIA request on this directly to the police. Police have been involved.
So I'm getting a sense, keep them
Closed.
closed.
I agree with that one.
Closed.
With that person.
Okay. Okay, the last one is
But
more.
thank you for all your hard work trying to
no,
make
it's
them,
It's fine.
you know.
This is our job. This is his job and it's our job.
It's I take the first scan, but it's everybody's job to decide this every 6 months, so, but I'm trying to set it up so you make it easier in the future, I promise. Thanks to Heidi and the cheat sheet, we'll be able to do this a lot faster. The last one is actually, is more, I brought it up at the end today, because I've been going, Heidi gave me them all back to the 80s, and so, a lot of them are just direct reviews. And some of them are settlement of some employee litigation over time too. There's some general discussions. The thing is, some of this is 40 years old. Like, how long is long enough? And that's what I wanted to kind of get a sense, because I could, you know, get into the 90s, and before long I'll be into the 2000s. Rather than me bring something that we were gonna hash over, I'd like to get a sense for, is there a feeling like, is 30 years enough? And we can just open things up after 30 years? You know, there's stuff that goes on in the most top secret things that don't
Even the
over,
federal government,
after 50 years.
after 50 years release stuff you never thought they would. I mean, heck, if they can do it.
Right,
Local
is
state
30
can
years
do it, we
enough?
can do it.
That's kind of like
I
what,
think.
most people,
And no one's even, I bet there'd be very little interest in the community in reading it.
Well, that's
It's the right thing to do.
Well, but to me, that's kind of the question that I posed, and I don't think our attorney had a great answer. But, you know, it's sort of the question of, you know, what is the benefit? Why? A 40-year past personnel issue where their family may still be in town, you know, that at the time, right, it was personnel, so it was not considered appropriate to be open. How much time needs to pass before it's okay to put it out there? He mentioned, what, 50 years after death? Didn't he say something like that?
But personnel isn't on the table though, is it? I mean, we're talking about releasing closed-limit city with personnel issues. I mean, I thought that wasn't even up for discussion. I thought we were talking about closed meeting, I thought we were talking about closed meeting minutes.
a lot of what
As
I,
a closed meeting on other things that are not personnel, but are a million years old. We're not talking
There's
about that?
Personnel.
it's
These are
direct,
personnel.
so there's two, there's actually, there's a bit of a sliding scale here.
Okay.
There's some director reviews, which are very clean and simple. There's a director kind of litigation suit that kind of then kind of gets the settlement discussions that go on and strategy. It was taken care of, it went away, and there was another one that was an employee human, is it the
Let's
equal
not
opportunity?
say what
Okay.
the details.
But there was another one that was settlement discussions. It was settlement discussions, not actually about the person, it was just legal strategy. And then those cases have been settled now for like,
What's the interest in opening
Well, is there
this up?
confidentiality
That's-
about
I think-
that?
that's what,
What's the
I
interest?
asked that
We
question.
don't know.
We don't know if
We
there's
don't know.
confident, you can't release it if there's a settlement and it was,
Yeah,
there's
what's
confidentiality.
Okay.
And if it's
interest
personnel, I don't
in
think you
this
can
one?
release, I mean, I just was thinking of all the things that are not obviously,
Okay,
you know, closed.
well, these things, yeah,
You know.
well, that's what I'm asking for, an idea. If that's the case, a lot of these will just be, I'll come back, it's just keep them closed.
just, you would put in the cheat sheet,
Yeah.
personnel.
Personnel,
Personnel.
director
Right,
review or
anything
something like that.
personnel, I don't think.
That's
Or
just,
legals.
that's just a,
Okay,
I
absolutely,
mean,
yeah.
the idea, I mean, I can't imagine what the merits of knowing what was in Jan's personnel director when she was 35. I can't imagine what possible value that could.
but at some point, yeah, so I think I'm here, the only thing is eventually, someday down the line, you've gotta keep these minutes forever closed. So it's just at some point, is it 100 years, you'll have to, somebody else will have to make that decision 60 years from now. But I'm
Okay.
getting the sense, consensus, if it's personnel, director review, keep it closed. Anything else, I'll bring back.
And I thought I heard legal issues, keep those closed.
Well, yeah, legal issues too.
Or legal
If there's
settlement.
Settlement, if there's any settlements involved,
Okay.
you have to assume there's confidentiality.
Okay, okay, but this is perfect, this is what I wanted to get.
But if somebody went to
consensus
closed session because they wanted to, like, talk about someone's birthday cake, then.
Well, like, let's say it was a real estate deal,
I don't
and the
know
deal
how-
is closed.
Right,
Open it up.
let it
on.
out,
Yeah, let it out.
air it.
Okay, this is very helpful. I got what I needed.
Good, anything else?
Steve?
Anybody wanna move, we end this meeting?
I'll move.
I'll move.
Second.
All in favor?
Bye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Again, Jim.
Everybody hang up all night.
Hang on.
Till your battery dies.
We'll be right back.